Chapter 120. The shocking arrival of the Tiger King. Jian Chen simply had no desire to make contact with the sword of the leader of the Zhou mercenaries. Narrowly dodging the giant sword of the leader, Jian Chen's sword disappeared into a blur of silver light once more as Jian Chen stabbed at the leader. Although Jian Chen's fighting ability was no weaker than a Saint Master, that was only because of his fighting strength. The Saint force within his body was still weaker than the one within a Saint Master by quite the amount. So if Jian Chen's light wind sword were to make contact with the leader of the Zhou mercenaries, then Jian Chen would be the one at a disadvantage here, making collisions between the two an unwise choice. Jian Chen's strongest advantage was his fast swordplay, which would allow him to beat anyone within his strength level before they could even react to it. Even for those who were a grade higher than him in strength, they would only be able to see the faint and blurry images of the sword. With his profound steps, Jian Chen would even be able to fight against anyone higher than himself provided they weren't a wind-attributed saint. Against a saint force that was stronger than his own, unless it was absolutely necessary, Jian Chen did not want to take any risks and end up facing against his weak point. Seeing Jian Chen use such an inconceivable speed to attack his throat, the leader's face became extremely serious as his saint force began to frantically circulate within his body. With his body in a peak state of fitness, the man's body turned around and then leapt to the side in order to narrowly dodge Jian Chen's otherwise fatal sword. Although Jian Chen had been fast in his movements, the peak Saint Master Strength leader had only been forced to dodge to the side. Although, at the same time, looking at the shoulder plate of the man, Jian Chen could see the white scar traces from where the light wind sword had grazed by. With a turn of his wrist, the light wind sword had suddenly moved in a way that made it look like a tiny snake under the skillful hand of Jian Chen. As the sword swished through the air, it pursued the nearby figure of the man who had only just recently dodged the sword. The leader's face had never been so serious. Although he could feel that Jian Chen's strength was nowhere near his own, the speed of Jian Chen's sword was far beyond what he could do. He could only dodge the sword narrowly, and with the sword relentlessly pursuing his throat, if he were to make a small mistake, then the possibility that he would lose his life was very high. Without hesitation, the leader brought his giant sword up to block the sword aimed at his throat. The moment he had brought the sword up to his neck, the light wind sword had already brushed against it. Although the light wind sword had failed to pierce into the leader's body, the sword chi that was coiling around the blade had made the leader extremely terrified. Secretly thinking to himself, "What a sharp sword chi! What type of method did this kid use to cultivate? Could it be that he used a battle skill?" Just thinking about the term battle skill had inadvertently fired up the man's spirits, and he couldn't help but think to spare Jian Chen. He thought that he could wrest away the battle skill from Jian Chen. Since battle skills were indeed very precious within the Tianyuan continent and that it helped one's cultivation improve by leaps and bounds. Even though he was one of the highest-ranked member of the Zhou mercenaries in Wake City, he didn't have a battle skill and neither did the great Saint Masters in the group. As his mind wandered about this topic, a fierce crisis was about to overturn him. Seeing that the silver-white light was rapidly getting bigger within his eyesight, he realized that this next sword stroke was 2 or 3 times faster than the last 2 strikes. In an instant, the silver sword had evaded his own great sword and arrived at his throat. A small ray of light could be seen as the sharp point of the sword flashed from within the glare. The leader was terrified beyond belief. In the moment he had reacted, there was only a foot separating him and the sword chi enveloped blade, but the sword had traveled this distance within a flash. Even though the leader had the strength of a peak Saint Master, there would be no time for him to dodge it. Just as the light wind sword was about to pierce into the leader's throat, an ear-piercing sound was heard as another sword came in from the side. Abruptly knocking against the light wind sword, it altered the trajectory of it so that it would go past the leader's neck without harm. The sudden appearance of this sword was caused by the second Saint Master of the Zhou mercenaries. Even after knocking the light wind sword out of the way, that man didn't stop there. He immediately attacked Jian Chen fiercely while the leader cried out, "Casa, for you to not pay attention at a time like this, did you want to die, you bastard?" Although that man was yelling at him, the leader wasn't angry at all. Instead, he felt his neck with his own hand as his face grew pale and his forehead started to drip with sweat. This was because when he felt his neck where his leather armor was, there was a gap revealing where the sword had gone through. If it were not for the intervention of another person, then having a simple cut on his leather armor would have been the least of his worries. At this moment, Jian Chen had already struck back at the second Saint Master. This man only had middle Saint Master strength and was weaker than the leader of the Zhou mercenaries by a small margin. In the few rounds Jian Chen had exchanged with the other Saint Master, he was slowly pushing back the other Saint Master. "Casa, why are you just standing there foolishly? Come quickly and help me. This kid sword is far too fast for me to continue blocking any longer. Goddammit, how is his speed this fast?" Looking at the still dazed leader, the mercenary that was fighting Jian Chen cursed out loud at him. Fighting Jian Chen was like fighting against the storming rain and winds itself, and with each series of sword strokes Jian Chen had swung, the more difficult it was getting to defend against. Even his leather armor was starting to have traces of Jian Chen's sword running across it despite the extraordinary resilience of the leather. He was afraid that very soon his body wouldn't have an area without a wound running across it. Hearing his friend curse at him, the leader's eyes narrowed as the saint force within his saint weapon pulsated tremendously. Raising his arm, he immediately dashed forward to slash down on Jian Chen. As the sword dropped down, a small amount of sword chi flickered as it flew toward Jian Chen. Sparing a sideways glance at Casa, Jian Chen swayed slightly to the side and dodged the sword chi-filled blade. The sword continued onwards to smash into a large tree with a resounding boom, allowing everyone to hear and see a large gash being revealed on the trunk. Afterwards, another ear-piercing shriek was heard as the two Saint Masters were already ready to strike once more, their saint weapons filling the air with their saint force. Jian Chen's eyes grew cold as he stared unflinchingly at the two incoming blades. The light wind sword began to release an even denser amount of sword chi that seemed to cover the entire sky as the sword made contact with the other two swords. Ding ding ding, the metallic sounds of swords rang out in the forest as in that moment, Jian Chen had swung out 18 times with his sword, each one accurately hitting the other blades. Each one of the 18 strikes hit the great swords right on the blade fiercely, causing the blade to shake with a strong vibration with every hit. When the amount of strikes had hit 18, the amount of energy transmitted into the other swords was far too much for the Zhou mercenaries to handle. Immediately, both of the mercenaries' right arms went numb, especially the place between their thumb and forefinger. Feeling the extreme amount of numbness in their arms, the two mercenaries looked at each other in shock. At this moment, the two of them had secretly wanted to flee, although they knew that Jian Chen's strength wasn't on par with them. Jian Chen was showing off a fighting strength that was frightening the both of them. His strength was hard to defend against, and against his lightning-fast speed, they both had to push their concentration to the extreme or risk seeing each other at the Yellow River. If they were not careful, then their deaths here would be for certain. "Captain Casa, the cub is already in our possession." The two Saint Masters turned around to hear who had just spoken, only to see an armored mercenary with the struggling cub in his hands. Its claws waved about in midair as it howled unceasingly. While it was a cute sight, it was also quite a pathetic one. Seeing this, the two mercenaries had a joyous smile on their faces, but then at the same time, Jian Chen's light wind sword flashed toward the leader's throat once more. This time, Casa was neither on guard nor able to dodge in time, and the other Saint Master was in no position to save him like last time. The sword chi-enhanced sword slashed through Casa's leather armor and pierced straight into his throat. "Casa!" The other mercenary reached out in shock, but at the moment he saw his leader's throat pierced through, his eyes bulged out of his eye sockets as he roared. A large amount of saint force began to condense within his saint weapon as he slashed at Jian Chen with it. Jian Chen didn't even bother to spare him a glance as he stamped off the ground. The force propelled him forward like an artillery shell as he rocketed toward the mercenary with the struggling cub. Seeing the peak Saint Master Captain Casa be killed, the mercenary's eyes bulged as he couldn't believe that such a strong expert would be killed so easily. However, the mercenary wasn't that stupid and immediately threw the cub at the remaining Saint Master that was fighting against Jian Chen. "Captain Cross, catch!" The cub flew into the air in a wild arc before landing perfectly within the arms of the last remaining Saint Master. Seeing the Class 5 cub within his hand, Captain Cross' previously murderous face suddenly calmed down as he hesitated before saying, "Everyone move out from here." Ho! As Cross spoke, the deep growl of a tiger suddenly came loudly from the depths of the forest. Coming through the pitch darkness, the 20-something people there all froze as they realized what they had just heard. Chapter 121. A frantic escape. As the roar was heard, the previously quiet magical beast mountain range became noisy once more. Practically every single magical beast was awoken and their sounds began to cry out in every direction. Every magical beast had made a sound, but not a single one of them would dare go against the tiger. Hearing the roar of the tiger, Jian Chen's face changed into a severely serious one. "Oh no, this is the roar of the Golden Fur Tiger King." His voice was unnaturally serious since the Golden Fur Tiger King was a Class 5 magical beast. This magical beast was special in the way that if it had reached a threshold, it could transform its body, and from that moment on, it would enter a new world. The Class 5 magical beast was far different than a Class 4 magical beast, and with Jian Chen's current strength, taking care of a Class 4 magical beast would be hard already, let alone a Class 5 one. Not good. It's the roar of the Golden Fur Tiger King. "Run, run quickly, everyone scatter or else we'll all die here," Captain Cross shouted as his voice trembled with fear. Even before he could finish his warning, he had immediately taken off into the forest with the cub of the Golden Fur Tiger King. Even the mercenaries who had been fighting the Flame Mercenaries immediately gave up the fight and immediately followed Cross into the forest. Suddenly, before Captain Cross could get too far into the forest, Jian Chen sped forward like a speed demon as his light wind sword flashed silver and aimed straight at the man's throat. Even at a dangerous time like this, Jian Chen had no plans of letting him go. Cross' face changed rapidly as he waved his own sword around. As his sword collided against Jian Chen's, Cross snarled, "Have you gone crazy? The Class 5 magical beast Golden Fur Tiger King is coming. If you continue to try to stop me, then you'll lose your chance to escape." Jian Chen was indifferent to Cross' words, almost as if he hadn't heard Cross speak at all. The light wind sword transformed into a ray of silver light as it traveled toward Cross once more. Cross raised his sword to defend himself against the lightning-like strikes. With no time to dodge, he was stabbed through the shoulder by Jian Chen, who at the same time grabbed at the cub with his left hand. Cross couldn't help but curse in pain as he continued to retreat with the cub in his hand still. "Everyone come together to block this kid. This cub is far too important for our Zhou mercenaries to lose." Hearing this, each Zhou mercenary began to hesitate, but no one dared to disobey Cross' orders. 5 men charged at Jian Chen with their saint weapons in hand in an effort to stall him. Cross had then fled into the surrounding forests while the unwilling mercenaries had stayed behind at first before quickly following Cross into the forest. Because great saints weren't a threat to Jian Chen at all, he had quickly dropped down 5 of them. The group of mercenaries that had followed Cross were quickly dropping like flies. "Ho!" The previously faraway roar of the tiger was getting closer as the Golden Fur Tiger King was approaching at rapid speeds. Jian Chen's face grew even more anxious as he looked at Kendall and said, "The Golden Fur Tiger King is approaching this area quickly. It won't take too long before it gets here. Captain Kendall, it's not good to stay here, let's leave quickly." Kendall looked at the blood-soaked members of the Flame Mercenaries and the multiple wounds on them. It was a good thing the battle didn't go on for long, otherwise they would have suffered from casualties. "Everyone hurry up and run away." Unable to dress up their bloody wounds, everyone quickly began to dash into the forest with great speed, but because of the various wounds they had, their movements weren't all that fast. "Ho!" Another roar of the tiger rang out, and this time it was extremely close by. In an instant, everyone could hear the tiger running towards them. The wind pressure it was generating was enough to flatten the tree leaves to the ground. Every single member of the Flame Mercenaries went pale in the face. As Kendall fled for his life, he looked behind him at Jian Chen and threw his space belt at him. "Jian Chen, you have the strongest strength amongst all of us, so your chance of escaping is the highest among us. I entrust my space belt to you. You have to make sure you take this out." Seeing Captain Kendall throw his space belt at him, Jian Chen wanted to refuse it, But then Kendall opened his mouth once more. Jianchen, don't refuse it. If by chance we don't make it out of these forests, then I beg of you to take care of our families. If I die here, then their lives would take a turn for the worse. My parents, my wife, and my child, they won't be able to live a good life in the future, so it all depends on you. Kendall pleaded with Jianchen. Sending a complicated look at Kendall, Jianchen nodded his head resolutely. Taking in the space belt, Jianchen stared for a little longer and said, Uncle Kendall, we'll definitely make it out of here. That golden fur tiger king isn't looking for us. Aw, save me. A call for help suddenly came from behind. Kobolds, that was kobolds. He fell in the swamps. Quickly now, grab onto my hand, kobolds, a voice called out. It was Xiao Dao, who was extremely anxious. Hearing this, everyone stood still as Jianchen looked behind him at Xiao Dao, only to see him on his belly with his hand outstretched into the swamps. In the swamp, Kobold's figure was already completely submerged. Jianchen's face changed as he immediately followed what Xiao Dao was doing and plunged his hand into the swamp. However, like Xiao Dao, his hand had felt nothing. Kobolds, Xiao Dao closed his eyes in pain and sorrow. AI. Jianchen sighed before hitting Xiao Dao on the shoulder, go, and then began to run once more. The other members began to sigh in sorrow as they closed their eyes. After a brief moment of silence, they continued to run deeper into the forest. With every second lost was another second of running that was thrown away. Because it was almost nightfall, the magical Beast Mountain range was very dark, so the visibility was low. On the path, everyone had tripped more than once, but they each picked themselves up from the ground as quickly as they fell and continued to run. Some decided to run on top of the tree branches in order to avoid the swamps below. After a while, Jianchen's foot suddenly stopped, halting his forward momentum. Jianchen, what are you doing slowing down? Hurry up and run. Kendall said anxiously. Jianchen didn't speak and pointed ahead of them. Kendall looked to where Jianchen's finger was pointing at, only to see the blurry figures of 10 mercenaries up ahead panting with exhaustion. It's the Zhou mercenaries, Jianchen said. Kendall's eyes flashed with a cold glare as he growled, so it is? They're not running, so what are they doing standing there? They can't run. The road ahead of them is blocked off by a Class 4 magical beast. Why is there a Class 4 magical beast here? Come, let's take a detour around. Jianchen jumped to a branch nearby. Oh! Another tiger roar came from behind, this time closer than ever. The roar was so loud, it shook the eardrums of the flame mercenaries, causing them to go deaf for a moment. After the roar, the gigantic figure came bursting in from behind and headed toward the Zhou mercenaries. Soon after the roar, the members of the Zhou mercenaries all fell to the ground, with a single member lifted into the air by the giant jaw of the tiger. Not good, the golden fur tiger king is far too fast. In such a short time it overtook us in speed. Let's go quickly, otherwise there'll be no chance. Seeing the shadowy figure, Jianchen cried out in shock at the appearance of it before immediately jumping without hesitation into the foliage nearby. Ahead, the Zhou mercenaries, who were all alive and well 1 breath ago, had fallen to the claws of the golden fur tiger king. All that was left was the mercenary who was holding the cub cross. The golden fur tiger king was the real deal. Those who were only at the Great Saint level or under would not be able to withstand even a single hit from it. Cross' left hand held the cub as his right hand held a sword that was ready to pierce the cub's neck, causing a stalemate between the golden fur tiger king and him. The golden fur tiger king was 4 meters long, but because of the guise of the night, the entire body of the tiger couldn't be seen clearly. Oh! The golden fur tiger king growled as its eyes became crimson. Staring at Cross with a furious glare, it didn't dare to act rashly with the cub in Cross' hands. As a Class 5 magical beast, it had enough knowledge to understand the situation. Get back, hurry up and retreat, otherwise we'll all die here. Cross cried out in terror as he stared at the golden fur tiger king. His entire body was shaking and his forehead was dripping with sweat. Oh. The cub began to struggle within the hands of Cross. Even it had begun to feel a little afraid. Even though it was a Class 5 magical beast in potential, it was still young, and did not have much power at the moment. The golden fur tiger king didn't give way, but then Cross bit his lip and pressed down with his sword, causing a few strands of golden fur to be cut away from the cub. "Ho!" The golden fur tiger king hastily growled before slowly retreating backward a few steps. However, the crimson glare in its eyes had intensified. Behind Cross was yet another Class 4 tiger that stared him down like one would look at their prey. Chapter 122. The death of Kendall. Seeing the golden fur tiger king retreat, Cross let loose a sigh of relief. At this moment, his heart was pounding, and if anyone were to stand behind him, they would be able to clearly hear it. In this moment of desperation, Cross was nearly at the end of the road of life. However, he was rejoicing now because he had succeeded. Yet at the same time, it was far too early to rejoice, since while the golden fur tiger king was temporarily held back due to the cub, the Class 4 tiger behind was not. There was no way for Cross to make the Class 4 tiger retreat, but he had to make sure he didn't do anything hasty, otherwise it would lead to an unwanted ending. Right now the golden fur tiger king's eyes were crimson with fury, and the experienced Cross knew that the tiger was in a stage of extreme rage. It was only because of the fact that he had the cub that it was not acting out on impulse. That cub was Cross' protective charm, and if he were to lose control of it, Cross knew that what would come next would be the end of his life. Under the threat of death, Cross was strangely calm as he thought about what to do next. Despite being in a situation where death was all but guaranteed, he still did not give up his desire to live. As long as there was an opportunity, he wouldn't let it go. Although, with everything said, it was an extremely weak strand of an opportunity to live, and there he wasn't certain if he would be able to escape. Then, Cross' eyes landed on the nearby flame mercenaries. His heart thumped for a second before he immediately tossed the cub over to where they stood. "Ho!" Just as Cross made a move, the glaring golden fur tiger king exploded into action. Immediately bursting over to where Cross stood, it swung both of its paws onto Cross' shoulders, inflicting deep wounds on his shoulders. The tiger released a sky-shattering roar, making Cross unable to breathe. Because of the golden fur tiger king's action, Cross immediately paled as he started to mentally blank out. He had thrown the cub over to the flame mercenaries because he had thought that the golden fur tiger king would change targets, but he hadn't thought that the tiger would move that fast. The moment he had thrown the cub, the tiger had appeared right in front of him. At that moment, Cross knew that his life was over. "Oh, oh." The cub began to cry out in fear after being thrown by Cross. The sense of weightlessness had terrified the cub, causing it to cry out even more than before. Seeing the cub rise into the air and then arc downward, the crimson eyes of the tiger grew alarmed as it began to panic. With a single roar, it leapt away from its position over Cross's body and chased after the midair cub. Feeling the heaviness in his shoulders being lifted, Cross was momentarily stunned. Seeing how the golden fur tiger king had chased after the cub, he immediately awoke to his senses and had an ecstatic smile on his face. Despite the deep burning sensation he was feeling from his shoulders, his arms and legs fiercely pushed against the ground and he stood up. Limping into the forest, he then disappeared from sight. Seeing Cross flee into the bushes, the Class 4 tiger that had been blocking the route uneasily stamped both of its paws on the ground and desperately wanted to chase after him. However, after seeing the explosion of anger from the golden fur tiger king, it suppressed its impulse. Although they initially possessed some intelligence, Class 4 magical beasts were still too stupid. Their abilities to think through problems couldn't possibly compare to a mature human adult's. The golden fur tiger king had only told it to block the group of people in its path, but it didn't tell the tiger to chase after anyone that tried to flee. Before any further commands came from the golden fur tiger king, this muscle-brained Class 4 tiger could only stare helplessly as Cross escaped. Even if it wanted to chase after it, it didn't dare to. Just as Captain Kendall was about to disappear into the foliage, a black blur flew over and struck him in the chest before falling to the ground. In response, Captain Kendall instinctively reached out his hand to pick up what had hit him. The moment his hand brushed against the black object, he understood just what exactly it was, and grew pale in the face. "Crap, this is the cub of the golden fur tiger king." By this point in time, The cub of the golden fur tiger king was no longer a valuable asset, but instead, a burning hot piece of iron. Whoever touched it would be burned. Just as Kendall had decided to throw the cub back, a terrifying roar was heard as a black figure instantly flew at him. The large, stinky mouth of the tiger then immediately bit down on Kendall's chest. There was simply no time for Kendall to react. The entire top half of his body was in the jaws of the golden fur tiger king, and its extremely sharp fangs sank deep within Kendall's body. Blood began to spurt out of his wounds like a fountain, covering the entire top part of his body with a bloody red color. Ugh! Kendall screamed in pain and desolation. The moment Kendall had been bitten by the tiger, his voice had already sounded weaker. "Captain Kendall! Uncle Kendall!" Seeing the top part of Kendall's body being bitten by the tiger, every single member of the Flame Mercenaries glared in hatred at the tiger as they cried out in heart-piercing tones. The heart-wrenching screams of all the Flame Mercenaries reached the ears of Jian Chen, who immediately withdrew from the foliage with a fearful face. Seeing Kendall pale with fright and blood loss from having the entire top part of his body bitten, Jian Chen let out a shout of alarm. The light wind sword instantly materialized in his right hand and exploded with a powerful, silver glow as sword chi coiled around the blade. Whoosh! The sword separated from Jian Chen's palm almost as if it had turned into an intelligent immortal sword and flew toward the golden fur tiger king's head. The moment the sword brimming with sword chi hit the head of the tiger, it only penetrated a small layer of fur, practically doing no heavy amount of damage to it. Although Jian Chen's soul sword was stronger than his regular attacks by tenfold, the golden fur tiger king was a class 5 magical beast. Since Jian Chen was no more than a middle great saint, inflicting a serious injury was an inconceivable event. Oh! Feeling a small tinge of pain on his head, the tiger's eyes turned crimson as they looked at Jian Chen. With a mighty force, it tore Kendall's body in two. The top part of Kendall's body was immediately swallowed by the golden fur tiger king as the lower half of his body immediately fell to the floor. Blood began to spill everywhere. "Uncle Kendall!" Seeing the lower half of Kendall's body fall to the ground, everyone in the group let out a horrified yell as their eyes teared up in anguish. "Oh!" The tiger snarled as it leapt toward where Jian Chen was. Using the profound steps, Jian Chen flew like a speed demon a few distances away in order to dodge the attack of the tiger. At the same time, the spinning light wind sword transformed into a silver streak of light that reorientated itself in midair and shot toward the tiger's head once more. However, just as the light wind sword was about to pierce into the tiger's head, the golden fur tiger king's tail disappeared in a blur and slapped against the light wind sword with a firm blow. Clang! The seemingly soft tail of the tiger was surprisingly strong as the light wind sword collided with the tail, creating a crisp sound. The sword was sent flying a few meters away as the incredibly strong sword chi around it disappeared, and the sword returned to its normal appearance once more. Jian Chen's figure shook slightly as his face began to pale. Slowly, a trickle of blood began to leak out from his mouth because of what happened to his saint weapon. His light wind sword symbolized his cultivation, and after using his spirit to control it, no matter how much damage was done to it in this state, Jian Chen would feel the direct consequence. While the tail of the tiger hadn't hit Jian Chen directly, the damage done to the light wind sword was clearly beyond what it could take, making Jian Chen take on the additional damage. The golden fur tiger king disappeared along with its shadow as it flew toward Jian Chen at a speed that couldn't be seen by the naked eye. Both of its claws immediately swung down with devastating power toward Jian Chen's chest. Jian Chen attempted to dodge, but was unfortunately slower than the golden fur tiger king. Because of his wounds from earlier, he was not able to completely evade the tiger's attack. The claws of the tiger carried a cold wind as they struck into Jian Chen's chest. At the same time, his chest became mutilated, and parts of his chest bones could be seen. With a great groan of pain, Jian Chen grew as pale as paper as he felt the fierce pain. Against a Class 5 magical beast, Jian Chen had no way to protect himself, and even the soul sword he was so proud of wasn't enough to leave even the smallest of wounds on the golden fur tiger king. "Jian Chen, hurry up and escape. I'll stall for you." Xiao Dao cried out suddenly as he pulled out his small dagger and raised it to stab at the tiger's body. Chapter 123. The Destruction of the Flame Mercenaries. Jian Qin, hurry up and escape. I'll stall it for you. Xiao Dao cried out suddenly as he pulled out his small dagger and raised it to stab the body of the tiger. However, the Class 5 Golden Fur Tiger King was far too strong for Xiao Dao to inflict any injuries at all with his saint strength. Even when the dagger stabbed into the body of the tiger, not a single trace could be seen. The tail of the tiger disappeared once more as it flew at Xiao Dao. Pa! A loud sound rang out as the tail of the Golden Fur Tiger King smashed against Xiao Dao's chest. The clothes around his chest blew apart as he sported a huge indentation on it. The unbelievably strong tail had completely smashed through his chest bones as well as broken apart the inner organs of his body. Blood mixed in with pieces of his inner organ were belched out of Xiao Dao's mouth as he flew 10 meters in the air before smashing against a tree. Xiao Dao. Seeing Xiao Dao in such a miserable state, Jian Chen's face paled as he cried out in shock. However, just as he was about to go over and examine the extent of Xiao Dao's wounds, the tiger immediately appeared next to him and ruthlessly bit at him. The jaws of the tiger carried an exceptionally bloody odor, making breathing very hard for Jian Chen. In a split second, Jian Chen forced himself to the right in an attempt to dodge, unable to bear with the pain in his chest. Rolling onto the ground, he moved away from the Golden Fur Tiger King. Against a Class 5 magical beast like the tiger, Jian Chen couldn't retaliate at all. With the soul sword, he was so proud of not even being a threat to the Golden Fur Tiger King. It went to show how big of a difference there was between the two schools. You guys hurry up and run, I'll stall it for you guys. Jian Chen yelled at the flame mercenaries behind him. Hearing Jian Chen, everyone looked at each other in a daze, but other than that, they didn't move. There was still quite the distance until they would be able to escape from the magical beast mountain range, but with their speed, how would they be able to outrun a Class 5 magical beast? That won't do, Jian Chen. Out of all of us here, only you have the chance to get away. I'll stall the Golden Fur Tiger and you hurry up and run. Just remember to take revenge for us. Hoopa cried out with his saint weapon in his hand as a way to show his defiant nature against his imminent death. None of us are capable of shaking off a Class 5 magical beast, so there is no hope for us. Everyone come and block the Golden Fur Tiger King. Protect Jian Chen as he leaves. Seeing the heroic Hoopa dash toward the tiger, everyone had a look of despair in their eyes. Hoopa is right, no matter what we do we will die today. In that case, then why not sacrifice our lives in one spectacular finale and protect Jian Chen? Everyone forward. Block off the tiger. Chang Ningfeng roared as he brought his giant sword up and chased after Hoopa. Jian Chen, remember to avenge us. The heroic actions of both Hoopa and Chang Ningfeng seemed to have infected the rest of the mercenaries. One after another, they carried a grim determination on their faces that seemed to defy death itself, and then chased after the Golden Fur Tiger King. Seeing every single member charge in at the tiger defiantly, Jian Chen was momentarily stunned. Immediately snapping to his senses afterward, he roared, "Out of the question, everyone run away. I'm still able to temporarily stall it a little longer." Jian Chen immediately connected with the light wind sword, causing a large amount of sword chi to once more levitate the sword. However, just one look at the sword, everyone could tell that the amount of sword chi was weaker than before. Although everyone had seen the strange thing that was Jian Chen's sword, it was far too late to actually care about it at that point. Jian Chen, hurry up and go, don't let us sacrifice ourselves in vain. Chang Ningfeng called out once more. The tiger's crimson eyes looked at the humans that were charging at it with disdain. However, it did not move a paw to do anything. Hoopa was the first to reach the body of the tiger. With an explosive yell, the saint force within his body entered his battle axe and immediately smashed itself against the tiger's body. However, as strong as Hoopa's blow on the Golden Fur Tiger King's body, it had only managed to cut away a few strands of the fur. With him only being a great saint, there was a very low chance of being able to do a lot of damage to the Class 5 magical beast. Soon after, the rest of the flame mercenaries attacked the tiger's body with their own saint weapons, but to no avail. Aside from Hoopa, who had succeeded in cutting away a few strands of fur, no one else had been able to do any damage, but the tiger hadn't moved at all either. Everyone's faces were already the color of ash. They had long since known that the strength of a Class 5 magical beast was tremendous, but it was only at that moment that they truly understood the extent of its strength. The defense of the Golden Fur Tiger King wasn't all that strong. It was just the fact that the flame mercenaries were too powerless to do anything major. Ho! The Golden Fur Tiger King thundered as it swept its claw forward, catching the weakest member there, Yun Xian, in the chest. His heart was immediately ripped into many pieces before the tiger disappeared once more before arriving at where Zhou Dekai stood. Pa! Another crisp sound rang through the area as Zhou Dekai's body was sent flying far into the air by the tiger's tail. Like Xiao Dao, his chest had completely caved in as his inner organs were smashed as well. Brother! Zhou Shaokai cried out in grief before turning back to the tiger in anger. With a snarl, he lifted his giant broadsword up in an attempt to cut into the beast. However, to the tiger, Zhou Shaokai's attack was like a scratch to relieve an itch and would not harm it at all. Against the flame mercenaries, the Golden Fur Tiger King was only using the most basics of attacks and bites. Despite that, the flame mercenaries had no ability to fight back at all, and in such a short moment, 3 people had already succumbed to the tiger, leaving only 5 people left to fight. Jianchen, hurry up and go. Don't squander our valiant sacrifice. Chang Ningfeng roared at Jianchen, who was still standing there. Jianchen, what are you doing just standing there? Hurry up and go. Remember, when you are stronger in the future, come back to the forest and kill this Golden Fur Tiger King and take its monster core. Hoopa yelled before the maw of the tiger descended onto the top part of his body. With a heavy clamp, Hoopa's sturdy body was split into 2 pieces as the tiger swallowed the top part. Seeing the death of Hoopa, Jianchen's body shook in grief as he looked at the remaining few members of the flame mercenaries. Biting his lips in frustration, he controlled his light wind sword back to his hand and immediately disappeared into the forest. His heart knew that even if he were to stay behind, it would change nothing. He would die along with the others since a Class 5 magical beast was not something he could take on. However, each one of the flame mercenaries were throwing away their lives in order to hinder the Golden Fur Tiger King just so Jianchen could gain some time to escape. This was something that hurt Jianchen far more than what the tiger had done to him. Entering the forest, Jianchen forced himself to ignore the screams behind him as he forged onward with all of the speed he could muster. The grasses within the forest were many, and the shortest of grasses reached up to half his height. While the pain in Jianchen's chest was unbearable, he was using the trees to boost himself forward as he flew at top speeds. Not only was this faster than walking on the ground, but he could avoid the swamplands below. Ho! No longer than 10 breaths after Jianchen had escaped into the forest, the loud roar of a tiger could be heard. It had appeared that the tiger was getting closer to Jianchen. Jianchen's face grew unsightly knowing that the Golden Fur Tiger King must have already disposed of the flame mercenaries and was resiliently pursuing after Jianchen. The Golden Fur Tiger King was extremely fast. Even before Jianchen could finish his thoughts, he could already faintly hear the tiger run through the forests, bringing a strong gale that flattened the nearby grass. Jianchen's face grew solemn as he thought. Against a Class 5 magical beast, other than running away, there was no other way to win. And right now, with the frightening speed of the Golden Fur Tiger King, even if he wanted to flee, he didn't have the power to. After all, speed was the specialty of a tiger type of magical beast, and even more so for a Class 5 magical beast. His Saint Force coiled around his body even faster, increasing Jianchen's speed by triple the amount. Right now, he was going all out. He was going the fastest speed he could muster. At the same time, he was desperately trying to think of a countermeasure, but even after a long time, Jianchen couldn't think of any way. Unless he were to come across someone who was at least at the Earth Saint Master level or another beast that could compete against the Golden Fur Tiger King, he would have no chance to escape. With the speed of the Golden Fur Tiger King, it wouldn't be long before it would overtake him. However, the chances of meeting a Earth Saint Master or another magical beast on the same level as the Golden Fur Tiger King outside of the Magical Beast Mountain range were slim to none. Ho! Another roar of the golden fur tiger king came from behind. This time, when Jianchen took a look behind him, he could see the large body of the tiger come within 20 meters of him. Jianchen's face grew even more unsightly. Death he did not fear. He had already died once, so dying again was not all that bad. Although, in this world, he still had people he was worried about, and so he did not want to die in a way like this just yet. Suddenly, the tiger transformed into a blur as it leapt towards Jianchen. Chapter 124. Strong Sword Qi. Jianchen was still in midair without the ability to move in any other direction. With the golden fur tiger king being so fast, there was no way for Jianchen to dodge. In a moment of desperation, Jianchen turned around abruptly with both of his hands outwards, lashing out against the head of the tiger. He borrowed the backwards force to push himself forward even faster, escaping from the bloody jaws of the tiger. His legs staggered a bit as he landed on the ground. Before Jianchen could even collect himself, a large force rammed into Jianchen's chest. Not being able to even see what happened, Jianchen flew backwards like a bullet as he was launched into the air once more. The clothes he had been wearing had already been ripped apart as his chest became one big indentation, making it seem as if his front was practically his back. Immediately, another strong amount of force circulated through his body, smashing against his inner organs in an instant. Jianchen flew 30 meters forward before finally smashing against a tree trunk and falling to the ground. His head knocked against a tree branch firmly as he fell to the ground unconscious. The golden fur tiger king had no intentions of letting Jianchen go. Stamping toward Jianchen, it opened its jaws wide in preparation to eat him. Just as the tiger was on the verge of biting Jianchen, wildly flickering, weak glows of azure and violet rose from Jianchen. Although the glows were quite faint, they were extremely eye-catching at this time of night. As the twin glows appeared, they illuminated the entire forest, and suddenly, a strong amount of sword qi enshrouded the area. But just as fast as it came, the sword qi quickly disappeared. Ayo! At the same time, a desolate scream emerged from the mouth of the golden fur tiger king as a rarely seen trace of fear appeared in its eyes. It was like the tiger had just been shocked, and it quickly retreated 10 meters back. Its bewildered tiger eyes stared at the unconscious Jianchen. The previously crimson eyes became clear once more as its body began to tremble and shake. Suddenly, blood began to spill out from the body of the golden fur tiger king in a continuous flow. Its previously entirely golden fur was now stained a bloody red, its body covered with countless wounds. While the wounds were minute in size, they were deep and intersected with one another in countless ways. Even the tiger's head was not spared. The sight of it was rather pitiful. The golden fur tiger king at that moment didn't retain any of its majestic aura. Instead, it looked like it had just come out of a desperate battle with countless deep wounds. The giant body of the tiger shook slightly as its eyes stared fearfully at the still unconscious Jianchen. At that moment, with Jianchen at the center, all of the grass and trees within 100 meters had been cut into countless pieces that floated in the air, filling the sky with a powder that literally covered the sight of the sky from the earth within an 100 meters circumference. The sky was so densely covered that one's line of sight within would have been completely blocked off if one tried to look around. The body of the tiger shivered more violently as it looked around itself in disbelief and shock. A Class 5 magical beast had a large amount of knowledge, and although it couldn't communicate like humans, it was still able to think. Its intelligence was equal to a human's, but at this moment, the golden fur tiger king was feeling a tremendous amount of shock. While a Class 5 magical beast could easily decimate anything within a 100-meter circumference, to be able to do it in an instant while reducing everything to a fine powder was something even a Class 6 magical beast would be unable to do. It was the strong amount of sword qi from before that had made the heart of the tiger tremble with fear. In a split second, the sword qi had caused countless deep wounds on the tiger's body, making it fear for its life. A short moment later, the fine powder in the air fell to the ground, stacking up to become a layer of dust. Within the 100-meter circumference, there wasn't a single trace of any living organism but Jianchen. Aside from the dust, there was nothing else in sight. Even the large tree that Jianchen was slumped against had disappeared. The beady eyes of the tiger looked around itself and let loose a terrified roar before running away with its tail tucked between its legs. Its speed was even faster than when it was chasing Jianchen. The area became absolutely silent after the tiger had left the area, leaving Jianchen alone on the ground in an unconscious state. A fine layer of dust now covered his body. The time quietly went by as the night sky silently retreated. The bright sun slowly rose into the air, emitting a bright ray of sunlight that warmed the earth. Shining down onto the area where no plant life existed, the sunny ground was almost like a carpet for the sleeping Jianchen. Perhaps because the lingering traces of a Class 5 magical beast could be felt, no other magical beast had approached the area that night. Even the most common of wild animals hadn't dared to come near, and so it wasn't clear if they simply hadn't been in the area, or if they hadn't dared to approach. Suddenly, within the circle where no plant life existed, a pile of dust began to shake and tremble. The pile of dust fiercely shook and slid off as it gradually revealed a person underneath. The figure that was hidden by the layer of dust the entire night was Jianchen. Brushing away the mysterious powder on him, Jianchen slowly opened his eyes only to be greeted by the azure sky overhead. Just as Jianchen wanted to lift his head, his mind was suddenly jump-started, reminding him of the state he was in. Immediately feeling the intense pain racking through his body, Jianchen couldn't help but yell out. Weakly lying on the ground, Jianchen sucked in a few deep breaths. With his spirit, Jianchen was already aware of what type of condition his body was in, even without actually engaging in an inner body inspection. Each of his internal organs had suffered from serious injuries that were lighter than when he had been right outside Wake City. However, to other people, injuries like this would have been fatal. His chest was already a mutilated mess to the point where even his chest bones could be seen after being smashed apart by the Golden Fur Tiger King. Just then, Jianchen thought about the attack he had suffered from the claws of the Golden Fur Tiger King before falling unconscious, and his head quivered in memory for a second. But when he took a look around, only emptiness greeted him. The perimeter around him was a zone of nothingness, without even a single plant. There was only a fine layer of dust covering the floor, and there weren't any traces of the Golden Fur Tiger King. Chapter 125. Hey, listen. Seeing the area around him, Jianchen was in shock as he continued to look around vacantly. Strange, where is this? Where is the Golden Fur Tiger King? Was I saved by someone? Jianchen was lying on the ground as he slowly looked around. His heart had quickly calmed down, but his mind was already thinking back to when the flame mercenaries had tried to protect him while he ran. They had sacrificed their lives to stall the Golden Fur Tiger King. As that thought ran through his mind, Jianchen's heart began to hurt once more. Even though he had not even known the flame mercenaries for over a month, they had shared a joyous friendship. Although the friendship was not very deep, in their final moments, each one of the flame mercenary members had still laid down their lives to act as and hold the tiger back and give Jianchen more time to escape. Even though the major reason was because they knew they wouldn't be able to run away from a Class 5 magical beast anyways, this was still a very heavy emotional blow to Jianchen. Uncle Kendall, Deer, Kobolds, Chang Ningfeng, Hupu, Zhoudekai, Zhou Shaokai, Xiao Dao and Yun Xian, don't worry. When I have enough strength, I will definitely come and take revenge for you all. I will personally kill and behead the Golden Fur Tiger King myself. Jianchen swore as an intense amount of killing intent radiated from him. Breathing out deeply, Jianchen forced himself to calm down as he surveyed his surroundings once more. Jianchen had his doubts about whether or not the Golden Fur Tiger King had run away, since this place seemed too extremely different from the place he had been in before he had fallen unconscious. What place is this? Exactly who saved me? Jianchen doubtfully wondered as he continued to examine his surroundings. Forget it, now isn't the time to think about this. Healing my injuries is my utmost priority right now. Shaking himself away from the distracting thoughts, he began to use the light saint force from the world essence to heal himself. The bizarre energy from the world essence quickly began to gather around Jianchen, and after a certain amount had gathered, The energy enwrapping Jian Chen's body turned a milky white color. The light saint force continuously entered Jian Chen's body and filled his wounds, causing them to slowly heal over time. After 4 hours, Jian Chen's spirit had finally run out, and he had no other choice but to stop. Although his wounds weren't fully healed, they would no longer impede any basic motor functions. Dispersing the remaining light saint force, Jian Chen slowly crawled up from the ground. Taking off his ruined clothing, he brought out a new pair of clothes from within his space belt. It was only then that Jian Chen was fully aware of just how much powder was around him. Slowly bending down to the ground, he scooped up a handful of powder. Not only did it feel cold, but there was a moist feeling to it, and when he smelled it there was a small hint of plant life. His right hand kneaded the powder between his fingers as an astonished expression formed in his eyes. Could this be the powdered dust of a plant? He said to himself while looking at the 100-meter circumference of emptiness around himself. While there was powder everywhere inside the circle, there was only tall grass outside. Seeing this scene, Jian Chen's body lightly shuddered. He couldn't believe the thought that had just run through his mind. Could all of the grass in this area have been reduced to dust? At this thought, Jian Chen couldn't help but feel surprised. He didn't know what had happened while he was unconscious, but he knew that reducing every single piece plant life into fine powder within this area was an extremely difficult task to do. Controlling this powerful energy alone wouldn't have been an easy task. Really, what happened here? Jian Chen wondered with a large amount of doubt and curiosity. Not wishing to stay there any longer, Jian Chen used the sun as his compass and began to move off in the direction leading out of the forest. Jian Chen did not want to hurt his mind thinking about whatever had happened while he was unconscious. In general, he only felt fortuitous that he had survived the ordeal. Jian Chen's injuries weren't completely healed, so he was very cautious as he traveled. In order to avoid any magical beast, he was going quite slowly. After traveling for 2 days, he finally made it out of the magical beast mountain range. In addition, all the wounds on his body were fully healed. Jian Chen walked aimlessly through the dense forests with a serious expression. The flame mercenaries had entered with 10 people when they had first entered, but only 1 person remained when exiting. Aside from Jian Chen, the other 9 mercenaries would forever stay within the magical beast mountain range, whether they had skeletons or not. At that moment, a group of 7 mercenaries walked within distance of Jian Chen. Based on their direction, they were heading into the magical beast mountain range. Within the group was a single 20-year-old youth who looked extremely arrogant. Around him were 6 40-year-old males who, judging by their appearances, were protecting the youth in the middle. The 7 of them clearly saw Jian Chen, but they didn't pay him any mind. As the 7 mercenaries brushed past Jian Chen, one of them suddenly spoke out arrogantly, "Kid, stop right there." It was the youth that didn't seem much older than Jian Chen. Jian Chen seemingly didn't hear the voice, and he continued to walk down the road with a heavy expression. Seeing that Jian Chen was ignoring him, the youth couldn't help but get angry. He coldly glared at the retreating figure of Jian Chen and shouted once more, "The kid over there wearing a sack for clothes, are your ears working? Did you not hear my words?" The youth's anger was rampant and his expression was brimming with arrogance. Jian Chen's figure paused as he lifted his head to look at the youth and spoke calmly, "Are you talking to me? No shit. If I wasn't talking to you, who else would I be talking to? There's no one else here." The youth rudely retorted. He didn't realize how contradictory his words were. Weren't he and the 6 mercenaries with him also people? Hearing the words of the youth, the other 6 mercenaries' muscles all twitched. They had wanted to laugh, but none of them dared to. Jian Chen raised an eyebrow and spoke in a low voice, "If you have anything to say, hurry up and say it." Having just experienced the unfortunate accident regarding the flame mercenaries, Jian Chen wasn't in a good mood, and even his speaking pattern had changed quite a bit. The youth's eyes flashed with indignation. Seeing Jian Chen speak to him so impolitely made him extremely angry. "Kid, let me ask you, did you or did you not come from the magical beast mountain range?" The pitch in the youth's voice had already gone up a few notches as he stared at Jian Chen in an unfriendly way. Jian Chen's eyes flashed coldly as he growled, "So what if I did?" The youth revealed a wicked smile. "That's perfect. I need to go there to cultivate, so you will lead the way for your lord. And if I'm happy with you, you'll earn a reward. Chapter 126. Tianxiong clan. Hearing this, Jian Chen's already poor mood grew nastier as a violent mood instantly arose from within his heart. His previously disorderly and expressionless eyes grew cold as he stared angrily at the youth. His eyes seemed to be able to shoot sharp swords as he growled, "Scram! What qualifications do you have to order me to guide you anywhere?" Jian Chen's tone carried a strong, murderous aura. The moment Jian Chen finished speaking, the other 6 mercenaries all gasped as their gazes uniformly locked onto Jian Chen. Having been the target of Jian Chen's powerful and piercing glare, the youth's heart couldn't help but tremble with a wave of cowardliness, and he took a step backwards. Soon afterwards, though, the youth realized he had momentarily lost self-control, and anger washed over his cowering heart. As a noble figure, having a no-named mercenary barely older than him intimidate him in such a way was a humiliation that would never be washed away. Glaring angrily at Jian Chen, the youth stepped forward and pointed at Jian Chen, yelling, "Smelly brat, what did you say to me? Why don't you try saying it one more time?" Jian Chen's frosty glare swept over to the 6 mercenaries surrounding the youth. At a single glance, it was obvious what their strength levels were. One of them was a peak Saint Master, 2 were low Saint Masters, and the other 3 were peak Great Saints. Compared to the Flame Mercenaries, the difference in strength was huge. "Take a hike," Jian Chen growled harshly. Even though he had already figured out from the amount of bodyguards around the youth that he was the son of an influential family, Jian Chen was by himself at the moment, and he wasn't afraid of any type of power. To him, this youth was only another inconvenience. Although he wasn't very comfortable with this annoyance, there was no way Jian Chen was about to apologize to this person. The youth looked at Jian Chen with a dark expression as he commanded the 6 mercenaries, "Capture him for me." "Yes, young master," one man answered as he moved toward Jian Chen like an arrow with his arms outstretched. This mercenary had a peak Great Saint level of strength after 30 years of cultivation. To that mercenary, Jian Chen was only a youngster whose strength couldn't be that great. If Jian Chen were a peak saint, he'd already be labeled as a genius. But with the mercenary being a peak Great Saint, catching Jian Chen wouldn't be any trouble at all. Jian Chen's eyes flashed coldly as he effortlessly dodged the other mercenary's hand. "You aren't strong enough to touch me." Normally, Jian Chen wouldn't speak with such disdain and harshness, but Jian Chen had been severely affected by the bitter end of the Flame Mercenaries. Thus, he was no longer feeling as well-mannered as before. This youth's arrogant attitude made Jian Chen's already bad mood reach an exploding point. Deep in his heart, there was already a strong urge to kill. Hearing these humiliating words from Jian Chen, this middle-aged man's face became unsightly. With his peak Great Saint strength, he would undoubtedly beat this 20-year-old kid easily. After being ruthlessly humiliated by this kid, he had lost face in front of all of his companions, as well as the rich kid who could affect his future prospects. If he didn't teach this brat a good lesson, he wouldn't dare to ever lift his head among his peers again. The man decided to not hold back any longer. He materialized his sword in his hand and fed his inner saint force to it, causing it to shine brightly. "Arrogant child, why don't you find out for yourself if I'm qualified or not to go up against you?" The man bellowed as he swung his sword at Jian Chen's shoulder with a cold snort. Jian Chen instantly materialized his light wind sword and stabbed it forward. A shining, silver ray of light followed the blade as it moved. Before the middle-aged man's sword could reach Jian Chen, the light wind sword had already stabbed into the man's throat. The man's entire body suddenly went rigid as his eyes slowly looked at the area where Jian Chen had stabbed him with the slender sword. With one final look of disbelief, the man's eyes slowly lost their luster and clouded over as he toppled down to the ground with a grieved face. Seeing their middle-aged companion be killed by Jian Chen, the other 5 mercenaries protecting the youth were amazed. Their eyebrows raised upward momentarily before they materialized their saint weapons, seemingly watching Jian Chen warily as a great threat. The youth couldn't believe his eyes as he looked at the fallen man next to Jian Chen. Pointing his finger, he tried to show his strength even though he was inwardly frightened by saying, Who dare kill my guard? Don't you know who I am? Are you tired of living? Although the youth and Jianchen weren't all that different in age, the youth had grown up sheltered, and so he didn't have any experiences, nor had he lived through any hardships. So the moment he saw blood being spilled on the ground, his cowardice immediately showed itself. Although he had used his clan's power to bully many people, those people were weaklings that didn't dare to rebel against him. Thus, his life had always progressed smoothly, and he had always looked down on others. However, he had never seen a person like Jianchen, who was so blunt and killed people as if it was an everyday occurrence. The youth that had never seen such a scene was absolutely intimidated by Jianchen's methods. Suddenly, another sturdy mercenary walked forward and politely gestured at him. "Dear Junior, we are members of the Tianxiong clan, and this is the young master. The matters that just happened were our fault, so I would like to apologize to you here. I hope that you can just look past this issue." This mercenary that spoke was neither servile nor overbearing. Jianchen's icy cold eyes stared at the group in front of him as his entire body radiated killing intent. Walking closer to them, he frigidly said, "Then come. If you guys can escape from my hand today, you will naturally be spared." Chapter 127. Show no quarter. Jianchen's icy cold eyes stared at the group in front of him as he radiated killing intent all over. Stepping closer to them, he spoke out, "Then fight. Whoever can escape from my hand today will be spared." The 5 mercenaries' faces all hardened as the previous one that spoke continued to say, "Dear friend, you really don't know what's good for oneself. If it were not for the fact that our goal is to help escort the young master to the magical Beast Mountain range to cultivate and that the clan leader told us not to make trouble on the way, then this would have been a difficult matter to resolve. Not only that, but do you really think that you can kill all of us? Our Tianxiong clan may not be the strongest, but we aren't an easy target to bully either." What the middle-aged mercenary had said made the youth believe in the strength of his clan and strengthened his confidence. "That's right, our Tianxiong clan isn't that easy to bully. Within Wake City, there are no other clans that aren't afraid of our Tianxiong clan. Kid, you've already killed one of my guardsmen. Come back with me to accept your punishment, or be prepared to leave your life here." Hearing the youth beside him, the middle-aged man couldn't help but scowl as if to say to himself, "Idiot." While the Tianxiong clan was strong within Wake City, that was the only place. Even within Wake City, the Tianxiong clan was in a dangerous position. Despite Wake City being a third-class city, the amount of clans that lived within it totaled around 20 in number. The Tianxiong clan looked to be an independent clan, but it was actually a deception. The middle-aged man knew clearly that while the Tianxiong clan looked to be impressive beyond belief, they were already a thorn to the side of every other clan. After all, a tall tree received the most wind, and many of the clans that were no weaker than the Tianxiong clan were watching them attentively. The moment an opportunity arose, they would strike without hesitation and divide the Tianxiong clan's territory amongst themselves. The Tianxiong clan had secretly amassed around a third of the city's power, and at such a juicy piece of meat like this, all the other clans were very envious. Also, because of the close proximity with the magical Beast Mountain range, the amount of people that flowed into the city was enormous. About 99% of people that frequently came into the city were mercenaries with all sorts of powers and influence. It could even be said that the city was filled with dragons and fishes. While it looked like the Tianxiong clan had many special connections and just as many permanently stationed mercenaries within their pockets, there were just as many clans and people they could not afford to offend or else risk being destroyed. Seeing how Jianchen had easily killed a peak great saint with such a fast sword stroke, the middle-aged mercenary was extremely surprised. With a sword stroke that fast, even he would need to use his entire strength to be able to dodge it. Thanks to this man's experience, these 2 factors were all he needed in order to establish that Jianchen probably had a strong background. There was most likely an extremely strong master supporting Jianchen. Otherwise, how could such a young person be so strong? So for that reason, the middle-aged man had tried to resolve the issue in order for the Tianxiong clan to have one less issue. Just as Jianchen heard the Tianxiong clan's young master say these things, his eyes flashed. Without saying a single word, his body began to move and he quickly charged at the youth. The light wind sword in his hand became a silver glow that pierced outward like lightning, with its target being the youth's throat. Although Jianchen understood that this youth was Tianxiong clan's major boss, never in his life had he been afraid of any power or influence. Seeing Jianchen unexpectedly act with such resolution, the middle-aged man's expression suddenly changed. With a fierce look in his eyes, a large sword materialized in his hand. The man tightly gripped the sword hilt and waved it sharply. The long sword shrieked as it sliced through the air and was thrust toward Jianchen's light wind sword. Although the middle-aged man had guessed that there was a high possibility that Jianchen had some type of major background behind him, he was also not one to be afraid of such things. The trajectory for Jianchen's sword suddenly changed. He lifted the blade and took the initiative to meet the middle-aged man's approaching blade. Ding! The sound of steel meeting steel rang out as Jianchen's light wind sword and the middle-aged man's large two-handed sword collided in midair. When the two sides came into contact, a powerful energy rippled through middle-aged man's sword directly into Jianchen's light wind sword. Jianchen's expression grew solemn. His right arm nimbly controlled the light wind sword to shake off the powerful energy that the man's sword had released. At the same time, he pressed his feet into the ground and instantly appeared behind the man. Displaying all of the advantages his fast sword had, he began to openly attack the man with a typhoon of concentrated attacks. Jianchen's strength pretty much grew every day. The current him was no longer at a disadvantage when facing the middle-aged man, who was at peak Saint Master level head-on. Of course, the most important reason for that was because the middle-aged man wasn't really a power-type warrior. He was only a bit stronger than Jianchen in terms of Saint Force. As the two faced off, the other four bodyguards also began to quickly fall back with Tianxiong clan's leader wrapped tightly in protection within their circle. Within a short breath's time, the middle-aged man and Jianchen had already exchanged dozens of blows. The more he attacked, the more fearful the middle-aged man became. Jianchen's sword was really too fast. Not only was every attack from the sword incomparably fast, but each one was also fatal. It looked as if the swordplay was messy, but it seemed to contain some kind of profound mystery that the middle-aged man couldn't comprehend. Each stroke within Jianchen's move was seamless, and the man couldn't find a single fault within it despite having a superior level of strength compared to Jianchen. The two were at a standstill, but as the fight grew longer, so did his disadvantages. Since Jianchen's sword was so fast, dodging each blow was consuming too much energy. Although it wasn't too much of a problem right now, but if time went on any longer, he would suffer a defeat sooner or later, and since Jianchen's sword was like lightning, the margin of time he had to defend himself was slowly shrinking along with his ability to retaliate. "Hail, Francis, come and help me. Tianfeng, go protect the young master and escort him out." Hearing the middle-aged man's words, the bodyguards protecting the youth changed expressions. They exchanged glances, their expressions hardening. They both clearly understood the strength of the middle-aged man who was currently fighting Jianchen. They hadn't ever imagined that even he, as one at the peak Saint Master level, would have to call for reinforcements. This really shocked them. They hadn't thought that Jianchen, who didn't even look 20 years old, could have such strength. Chapter 128. Forest Fight. The four bodyguards immediately split up, and two people began to charge at Jianchen with their saint weapons raised. They quickly entered the battle, and began to attack Jianchen together with the peak Saint Master's strength middle-aged man. The bodyguards that had just joined were the troops' only two primary Saint Masters. With their entry, the pressure on Jianchen immediately increased by a lot. However, with just his profound steps and his fast sword, he was still evenly matched with the three Saint Masters, and showed no signs of being at a disadvantage. The youth also felt a trace of fear. Under the protection of the other two peak great saint bodyguards, he quickly left the area. His figure soon disappeared without a trace. Although Jianchen sensed the youth's departure, he didn't try to chase after him. The three Saint Master bodyguards in front of him definitely wouldn't allow him to leave and harm the young master of the Tianxiong clan. Jianchen fought an intense battle against those three Tianxiong clan bodyguards in the forest. A lot of the surrounding fauna was affected by the battle, and soon, the entire area had become a mess. Quite a few thick and sturdy trees had even been cut in half. Once again dodging the large sword swinging toward him from the side, Jian Chen launched a fierce attack at the primary Saint Master, preparing to break through him. As the sound of the sword splitting the air rang out, Jian Chen's light wind sword suddenly turned into a blur as it quickly pierced toward the primary Saint Master in the form of countless blades. This forced the man to panic and caused him to have no time to reform his defense. Eventually, Jian Chen managed to form holes in the man's defense. Taking advantage of one of these holes, the light wind sword abruptly trembled as a silver flash of lightning pierced forward at a speed that was somewhat faster than before. Before the primary Saint Master could even react, the light wind sword had buried itself deep into the man's throat, the blood-soaked point poking out from the other side of the neck. "Hail!" Seeing the man be stabbed through the throat, the other two people's expressions suddenly changed as they shouted out in a tone mixed with grief. Jian Chen's arm didn't pause at all. Immediately after the light wind sword pierced through the man's throat, he pulled it right out, and instantly shifted his attention to the other two. His body flickered as he silently appeared in front of the primary Saint Master without a trace, just like a demon. The light wind sword once again flashed like silver lightning as it was thrust forward. The middle-aged man's expression completely changed. He immediately lifted his saint weapon and held it in front of his throat when he saw the light wind sword heading towards him. Suddenly, the speeding light wind sword dropped downward, seemingly evading the large sword protecting the man's body, and began to pierce toward the man at a sharp incline from below his saint weapon. The middle-aged man was unable to react at all to the light wind sword's sudden change. Eventually, his eyes were filled with disbelief as the sword deeply pierced through his throat. At that moment, a biting cold wind blew past behind Jian Chen. A large, 3-inch wide, two-handed sword slashed through the air with a powerful amount of saint force. Before it even reached Jian Chen, the wind pressure generated from it had already caused Jian Chen's clothes to stick tightly against his back. Feeling that chilly wind, Jian Chen immediately pulled out his sword from the man's throat and turned around to guard his front with his sword, without any hesitation. Clang! The large two-handed sword containing the powerful saint force fiercely collided with the light wind sword. The amount of energy it generated forced Jian Chen back a few steps. After sending Jian Chen backward with attack after attack, the middle-aged man's gaze shifted to the bodyguard that had already been pierced through the throat by Jian Chen. The crimson blood was currently surging outward like a fountain from the throat. As life began to gradually fade from his eyes, his expression was still frozen in disbelief. A moment later, his entire body slowly collapsed to the ground. With reddening eyes, the man glared at Jian Chen fiercely like a bloodthirsty, ferocious beast. He exploded in anger. "Even if I die today, I have to kill and behead you as revenge for my brothers." Powerful saint force began to gather on the large sword in the middle-aged man's hands. He raised the sword tip up, and with a heavy push of his feet off the ground, he quickly charged at Jian Chen. Jian Chen's gaze hardened as he locked onto the middle-aged man. His grip on the light wind sword couldn't help but tighten. He had already seen the middle-aged man's plans to kill him. Faced with this peak Saint Master that was unafraid of death, Jian Chen was faced with some trouble. After all, his current strength was only at the middle great saint level. The difference between that and a peak Saint Master was still a pretty large gap. The layer of thick, hazy white light that surrounded the blade was evidently more dense than it had been before. Heavy yet penetrating sword chi was faintly released from the light wind sword. Just as the middle-aged man was about to charge forward, Jian Chen's right shoulder suddenly jolted, and the light wind sword in his hand split the air as it pierced outward. The needle-thin, silver-colored sword chi was shot out from the sword point and sped toward the middle-aged man at a speed that made it hard to track with the naked eye. Seeing this slender yet dense amount of sword chi, the middle-aged man didn't dare to be careless. The sword flew at him so quickly that he didn't have time to dodge, so without any better options, the man could only release all of the saint force he had left into his sword as he swung it downwards. The moment the man's giant two-handed sword made contact with Jian Chen's sword chi-enhanced sword, The two-handed sword easily scattered apart the sword chi after some minor obstructions. At the same time, Jian Chen suddenly moved toward the man a few meters in front of him in a way that made him resemble a blur with his light wind sword ready to attack. The middle-aged man immediately retracted the large sword to block Jian Chen's attack. Afterward, the two began to fight intensely once more. In his previous world, Jian Chen's sword play had already reached the pinnacle, and even though this middle-aged man was stronger than him, the man's understanding of the ways of the sword was merely a drop in a bucket compared to him. His sword was at a speed thought to be inconceivable, and the way he used it had already reached a level of perfection. Against the stronger, middle-aged man, he would not be able to go against Jian Chen's sword for much longer since his defense wouldn't be able to keep up. Jian Chen began to attack every part of the man's body with quick precision. Using his light wind sword, it was already like a blur that was impossible to see the blade move. And with it, Jian Chen continued to quickly attack the man to the point where resisting was becoming a challenging task. In addition, every attack the light wind sword made was fatal. This forced the middle-aged man to lose his chances of heavily injuring Jian Chen at the stake of getting wounded himself. At the moment, the middle-aged man extremely regretted his actions. At the same time, he bitterly hated the Tianxiong clan's young master. Originally, this journey had been completely incident-free. Unfortunately, this young master of the Tianxiong clan who didn't know the difference between heaven and earth had purposely decided to provoke this fiend in front of him. Innocently getting into some trouble was fine, but in the end, it had harmed them to the point where two of the brothers he'd known for dozens of years had died. In addition, he himself was now stuck in a dangerous situation. He most likely wouldn't even have a chance to live after today. For a while, the two people fought like flashes of lightning. Eventually, the middle-aged man was unable to block in time, and Jian Chen's viper-like light wind sword stabbed him in the heart. Chapter 129. Trouble at the door. Looking at the sword piercing towards his heart with sluggish eyes, the middle-aged man couldn't believe what he was seeing. Being defeated by a brat barely past the age of 20 years old with a strength that wasn't even at the peak great saint level was truly humiliating. Because of the arrogant talk of the Tianxiong clan's young master, his 50 years of cultivation had been laid to waste by a 20-year-old youth. Out in the middle of nowhere, his life was destroyed in a single moment. Just thinking about this fact made the man nearly cry out with grief. As his life essence slowly escaped from him, the man's bright and clear eyes slowly clouded over and rolled back into his skull as his sturdy body fell to the ground. Jian Chen slowly retracted his light wind sword. Blood flowed down the blade as if it were alive, slowly gathering at the tip before falling to the ground, drop by drop. After a few battles, the uneven dirt ground had become wet with blood. Jian Chen slowly caught his breath. Attacking two primary Saint Masters and a peak Saint Master consumed quite a bit of Jian Chen's energy. Faced with three opponents whose strength all surpassed his own, Jian Chen had already made an all-out effort. If it weren't for the fact that he had cultivated for a while, increasing his base strength as a middle great saint by quite a bit, he most likely would have spent a much longer time on trying to kill these three Saint Masters. However, after killing the three people, Jian Chen's grief from the deaths of Captain Kendall and the others had abated quite a bit. Jian Chen's gaze indifferently swept across the three corpses before finally falling onto their space belts. After some hesitation, he slowly advanced forward to retrieve the belts and examine their contents. Because he had consumed over 100 times more monster cores than the average person in his cultivation, Jian Chen required a great amount of them. Moreover, Jian Chen clearly didn't have enough money to purchase such an extensive amount of monster cores. That's why the thing he wanted to acquire the most were monster cores. It was only possible for him to gain them by killing magical beasts or by taking them from corpses. Besides, taking items from a dead person was an extremely common occurrence in Tianyuan continent. After all, 30% or more of the fights that happened on Tianyuan continent were because people were seeking another party's items. After removing the three space belts, Jian Chen inspected their contents. Although these three were Saint Masters, it was clear that they weren't wealthy. Aside from some everyday products and camping tools, they really didn't have anything else. In the end, Jianchen was only able to fish out some 10 purple and gold coins, 15 Class 2 monster cores, and 5 Class 3 monster cores. Without any hesitation, Jianchen stored the monster cores into his own space belt. His gaze shifted back to the 10 purple and gold coins, and he hesitated for a bit before finally taking those as well. Although it wasn't a large amount of money, to commoners it was still quite a bit of wealth. Just throwing it out here was a waste, and rather a pity. After storing everything, Jianchen tossed the 3 space belts to one side. Without bothering to clean up the corpses, he directly left the area. By the time he had returned to Wake City, the sky had already darkened. After eating some food at the hotel, Jianchen requested a room and went to sleep. Because Jianchen had only requested a normal room, its layout was extremely simple. It had a single wooden table, a few chairs, and a bed. Aside from these, there was nothing else present. However, the place was extremely neat and tidy. One could even say it was completely spotless. That night, the shining full moon suspended high up in the sky emitted bright rays of silver moonlight, filling the entire pitch-black sky with a faint silver color. Even the scattered, thin clouds could be seen clearly. Jianchen moved his chair to the window side and sat there with his head raised. He looked up at that round moon emitting a bright glow while deep in thought. Perhaps it was more appropriate to say that he was in a sluggish daze. Jianchen was constantly recalling the past 2 days in his mind. The Flame Mercenary group had been hunted down by the Class 5 magical beast Golden Fur Tiger King, and eventually, the members had sacrificed their lives to hold the beast back, shielding Jianchen so that he could flee. Although 2 days had already passed, and the grief from the deaths of the Flame Mercenaries had faded quite a bit, Jianchen was still unable to forget the scene. That scenario had been branded deeply into the depths of his soul, and he would most likely never forget it for the rest of his life. It could be said that he and the Flame Mercenaries were strangers that had come together by chance. Although during the past few days, everyone's relationships had grown quite close, they had chosen to die for the sake of covering for Jianchen and letting him flee. Although there were also some selfish motives for this, they all understood that faced by the pursuit of the Golden Fur Tiger King, they had absolutely no way of running away. Despite knowing this, their actions had still impacted Jianchen's heart by quite a lot. Captain Kendall, what is your greatest wish? My greatest wish is to make the Flame Mercenary Group become the #1 mercenary group in the continent. A scene appeared in Jianchen's mind as he sat next to the window. His originally lifeless eyes gradually recovered their vigor, tightly clenching his fists as he murmured, "Captain Kendall, you were the strongest one in the Flame Mercenary Group. I had never imagined that back then, you'd be the first to depart. During these past few days, you were always the one that had cared for me the most. Now that you're gone, your life's greatest wish can no longer become true. In that case, let me make your wish come true in your stead. I, Jianchen, swear that I will spend my life trying my utmost to make the Flame Mercenary Group the #1 mercenary group in the Tianyuan continent," Jianchen said resolutely. Jianchen untied the space belt that Captain Kendall had given him. He stared at the belt in his hand in a trance as the memories of the words that Kendall had imparted to him when handing him this belt replayed in his mind. "Jianchen, don't refuse. If we can't leave this forest alive, then our families will all be under your care. If we all die here, then their lives will become incomparably painful. Whether or not my parents, my wife, and even my one child will be able to live through the days after my death will all depend on you." Jianchen let out a long breath. He suddenly felt extremely guilty. Captain Kendall had given this space belt to him before his death, entrusting Jianchen with his family's well-being. However, even now, Jianchen still didn't know what the names of those in Captain Kendall's family were, or even where they lived. How was he supposed to act? Just then, Jianchen's heart suddenly became filled with worry. If Captain Kendall had entrusted Jianchen to take care of his family, Jianchen guessed that Captain Kendall's family was definitely extremely impoverished. After losing Captain Kendall, their pillar of support, how could his family possibly live the rest of their lives happily? When thinking of how incomparably difficult Kendall's family's lives would be from now, Jianchen's heart fell into panic. He wanted to find Kendall's family as soon as possible, and give them whatever Captain Kendall had entrusted Jianchen with in order to bless them with happy lives. Jianchen sat by the window for the latter half of the night, before eventually returning to his bed to cultivate. Right now, Jianchen needed to grow stronger, and even stronger. The night was calm, and it quickly passed by without incident. The next morning, Jianchen, who had been submerged in cultivation, suddenly opened his eyes. He didn't know why, but he suddenly felt a bad premonition in his heart. Jianchen got out of bed and walked up to the window to look outside. After a single glance, Jianchen's expression abruptly darkened. The outside of the hotel had been surrounded by hundreds of people wearing white robes. Every single one of them were identically dressed. From this, it could be seen that they represented a single power. Jianchen unexpectedly discovered that in the middle of the group of people was the young master of the Tianxiong clan that had escaped from him yesterday. Chapter 130. Trapped in the restaurant. Seeing the group of people outside the restaurant, Jianchen's expression immediately hardened. Since the moment he saw the young master of the Tianxiong clan standing in the middle, he had already guessed that the reason these people had gathered here so early in the morning was because of him. After all, yesterday he had not only committed an offense against the Tianxiong clan's young master, but also killed 3 of the clan's strong bodyguards. In short, he had already earned the hatred of the Tianxiong clan yesterday. After all, Peak Saint Masters still counted as very good hands in a remote place like Wake City. No matter in which clan in Wake City one was, Peak Saint Masters all had pretty high positions. If a clan lost a Peak Saint Master as well as 2 primary Saint Masters, for no reason and didn't regain face, the clan's military power in the city would undoubtedly decrease by quite a lot. This was extremely important to a clan's future. Right now, the entire restaurant had been surrounded by the Tianxiong clan. Wanting to leave here without anyone knowing was impossible. Jianchen could only helplessly leave his room and walk toward the main entrance of the restaurant. Although he was getting closer to his doom, and the opposite party had hundreds of people as well as some strong experts, there wasn't a single trace of panic or concern in Jianchen's expression. He looked just as calm as he normally did. When Jianchen walked downstairs and arrived at the restaurant's lower floor, he discovered that there were already many people gathered there. It was currently the peak hours of breakfast, and all of the tables in the lobby were filled with bowls and dishes emitting the fragrant aroma of meat. However, not a single person was sitting at those tables and enjoying the bountiful breakfast. Instead, they were all swearing as they stood up from their seats and slowly began to walk outside the door with indignant expressions. That Tianxiong clan is too damn arrogant. I was happily eating here before they suddenly commanded all of us to leave. Whatever random crap you guys do has nothing to do with us. We're just eating our own meals, it's not like we'd hinder you. That's right, that Tianxiong clan really thinks of themselves as Wake City's #1 clan. They've become undisciplined and out of control even though they're just a small clan. When they encounter those famous experts in Tianyuan continent, they'll be eradicated with just a slight stretch of a finger. Most of the people eating in the restaurant were mercenaries. Some of the more short-tempered and braver ones grumbled as they left, but they said their complaints quite softly, as if murmuring to themselves. Not a single person dared to say it out loud. Despite this, the soldiers were all at a certain level of strength and could hear the murmurs loud and clear. The majority of the few merchants in the restaurant didn't dare to show any signs of dissatisfaction in their expressions. They obediently left their seats and hurriedly walked out of the restaurant. Only the merchants that had certain amounts of strength were left. They all had expressions of extreme dissatisfaction. They were pretty much all foreigners, and although they weren't afraid of the Tianxiong clan, a strong dragon couldn't suppress a snake. It was clear that they wouldn't go against the Tianxiong clan over such a minor thing and stir up more trouble for themselves. Thus, they eventually all walked out of the restaurant as well. There were 4 white-robed middle-aged men guarding the restaurant entrance. Their powerful, electric-like gazes unceasingly scanned the people leaving. Although they had also heard a few of the mercenaries curse the Tianxiong clan in dissatisfaction, they didn't dare to say a single word, and acted as if they hadn't heard the curses. Quite a few of the mercenaries in the restaurant were foreigners that had some level of power backing them up, or were a part of a mercenary group. Although the Tianxiong clan proclaimed itself as a leading clan in Wake City, they didn't want to upset any outside powers because some of them were so powerful that even the Tianxiong clan couldn't afford to provoke them. Soon, the restaurant's customers had all left. In such a large restaurant, the only ones remaining were some servants standing there in a daze, at a loss of what to do. The restaurant owner also stood to one side with an expression of concern as he stared unblinkingly at the vacant restaurant. His face revealed the pain that he was unable to voice out. Quite a bit of income had disappeared. At that moment, the only one still in the restaurant aside from the owner and the servants was Jianchen. Even the customers that had been resting on the upper floor had been forcefully oppressed and brought out by the restaurant servants. Jianchen sat on a chair with a leisurely expression, staring with interest at the group of Tianxiong clan's people still holding fort outside the restaurant. His expression was completely relaxed. Although Jianchen seemed to be carefree on the outside, he had actually put up his guard ages ago. After all, this time they had arrived with ill intentions. Moreover, he clearly sensed that there were quite a few powerful experts among these people. At that moment, the young master of the Tianxiong clan that Jianchen had encountered yesterday in Magical Beast Mountain Range walked into the restaurant with the protection of a large group of people. As soon as he entered the restaurant, the young master's gaze fell onto the sneering Jianchen sitting on the chair. A sinister look flashed in the young master's eyes. "Brat, I didn't expect that you'd still be here today. Yesterday, I let you off. Today, I'll pull you out from your roots," the young master said with a cold smile. He looked at Jianchen and said, "What about it? Are you scared? Do you regret it now?" The group of Tianxiong clan members standing behind the youth all sharply looked at Jianchen. Jianchen lightly snorted in disdain. His gaze swept across the crowd of people standing behind the young master as he said, "Don't tell me that you think this amount of people is enough to scare me? You're being a bit too self-confident." The young master of the Tianxiong clan sneered back as he said, "You're even more arrogant than I thought. However, I can't help but admire your ability to talk big. Even at a moment like this, you still won't admit your mistake or kneel down and beg me for mercy. Could it be that you think you can walk away alive today in front of so many of Tianxiong clan's experts? Furthermore, I brought at least 100 people with me today," the young master said with unrivaled confidence. In his opinion, he would definitely devour Jianchen today. Jianchen couldn't help but smile faintly at these words. Just now, he had suddenly discovered that talking with a hedonistic son of rich parents like him, who had never been out in the world, was an extremely amusing thing to do. "Then do you believe me when I say that not only will I leave here today, but I will also break all of your soldiers at the same time?" Jianchen's tone gradually turned darker as he spoke. Chapter 131, Death Siege 1. Hearing Jianchen's haughty words, the young master of the Tianxiong clan couldn't help but laugh. He stared at Jianchen like he was stupid before sneering in disdain. "Just you alone? Fine then. I'll see for myself if you can escape from this entrapment. Show me how many casualties you can inflict on these Tianxiong clan mercenaries with your abilities." The young master had brought over 100 mercenaries, with at least half of them being of the great saint level. There were also around a dozen saint masters, so he did not believe that this guy would be able to run away from them at all. Without wanting to waste any more breath on such superfluous talk with Jianchen, the young master waved his hand and commanded, "Charge! I want this arrogant brat to be taught a good lesson." The few mercenaries by the young master's side looked at each other. One person sneered, "It's merely a brat, there's no need for all of us to make a move." Turning toward one of the Tianxiong representative mercenary troops, he commanded, "You guys go bring that brat over." "Yes, sir." Following the man's orders without any hesitation, the group immediately walked 10 meters forward to where Jianchen was. With a cold glare, one of the mercenaries growled, "Kid, it'd be best if you just obediently let yourself be captured and return with us to the Tianxiong clan. This way you'll suffer less, otherwise I can guarantee you'll be in for a lot of pain." Jianchen held his head up high and stood at his original position defiantly. This was a time where he could show off his ability, and the silver light wind sword gradually materialized in his hand. In that instant, the aura around Jianchen completely changed. Everyone from the Tianqiong clan could tell what Jianchen was planning on doing based on his action. Attack! The man who spoke previously cried out, causing the group of mercenaries to call out their saint weapons as they charged toward Jianchen. Jianchen had a look of disdain on his face. To Jianchen, who could even kill experts of the Saint Master level, these mere saint users weren't worth even looking at. The moment the several people neared Jianchen, the light wind sword suddenly turned into a blurry mirage, and quickly pierced out in the form of multiple phantom swords. At the same time, the assaulters came to a screeching halt as trickles of blood began to pour from their throats. Then, faint traces of blood gradually appeared, and finally, dyed their clothes a bloody red as it suddenly burst out from their throats. In the end, all the men collapsed at the same time. The expressions of the few mercenaries standing by the young master simultaneously changed, and they exchanged glances. They could tell from the gaze in their opponent's eyes that he was extremely serious. The men that had died were saint-level cannon fodder who were used to scout out Jianchen's strength. No one really felt their deaths a shame. However, when they saw the technique Jianchen had used to kill the people, their hearts sank. In that moment, they could only see the faint image of his sword. Jianchen's was so fast that they could barely see it with their vision. In a flash, Jianchen had killed a group of mercenaries from the Tianqiong clan, immediately dominating over everyone present. Although the restaurant was overflowing with people, it was engulfed in a pin-drop silence. Tianqiong clan's group of mercenaries all looked at Jianchen in a daze. They hadn't thought that someone as young as Jianchen could fight against so many people from their clan with ease. He had even dared to kill the hired mercenaries right in front of the Tianqiong clan. This was truly shocking and unexpected. The Tianqiong clan had dominated Wake City for over a dozen years. Although they had clashed with many different mercenaries, they had never fought against someone of Jianchen's age who had dared to fight by himself. This was a first in the entire history of Wake City. After a small amount of hesitation, the white-robed man next to the young master said in a low voice, "Dear fellow, I don't know where you came from or what teacher you are taught under, but why must you oppose the Tianqiong clan?" Jianchen's display of strength at such a young age had revealed him to be a high-leveled expert, and the experts of the Tianqiong clan couldn't even make a guess on who was backing him up. They were all afraid that Jianchen had the support of someone they couldn't afford to offend. If they did, then it would perhaps bring a great amount of trouble for the Tianqiong clan. It was possible that the Tianqiong clan that had dominated Wake City for so long would be eliminated, just like that. This wasn't a result that any of them were willing to see. Although these mercenaries were employed by the Tianqiong clan and were not really affiliated with them, they weren't treated all that badly. After being employed by the clan for so long, the mercenaries had developed a few feelings for the clan, and none of them had any desire to see it be condemned to extinction over such a small matter. Jianchen sneered. Thanks to his experience as a traveler in his previous world, he had immediately guessed what the man was trying to get at. "I am a lone traveler, where I come from is no importance to you all. As for who my teacher is, I'm sorry, but up until this day, I have never had a teacher. Lastly, it was your Tianqiong clan that provoked me first. Since when did it change to me being the one who made conflict?" Jianchen laughed coldly. Hearing that, the few middle-aged men immediately let loose a breath. Afterwards, the man that had previously talked continued, "Then you'd best come back to the Tianqiong clan with us. Otherwise, we won't show the smallest amount of mercy toward you. If you come out of this missing an arm or leg, it would be bad." After seeing Jianchen dispatch the group of mercenaries without any effort, these men didn't have any strong desires to fight against him. Although they had confidence that they could capture Jianchen, the lightning-like speed of his sword was something they was afraid of. If they were to get hurt, there was no way their profits would surpass their gains. If they could capture Jianchen without much effort, they would be extremely happy. "In your dreams?" Jianchen sneered. His right arm shook as the light wind sword quickly danced in the air, its tip flying toward the group of people. A large amount of sword chi enveloped the sword once more as Jianchen said, "Speak less bullshit. If you want to do something, then hurry up." Jianchen's provocation infuriated the entire Tianqiong clan. The young master had long since lost his patience. He immediately waved his hand as he roared, "Why are you guys just standing there? Hurry up and capture him." Although this group of people standing next to the young master did not have low status or positions, it was obvious that their backbone was still the young master of the Tianxiong clan. The moment the words left his mouth, this group of people began to charge forward. Chapter 132, Death Siege 2. A strong killing aura flashed through Jian Chen's eyes. Not waiting for the Tianxiong clan to advance any further, he lifted his own sword to attack. With a speed almost invisible to the naked eye, the light wind sword flashed out at the swords approaching Jian Chen. Against such a fast sword, even the stronger people in the group weren't able to properly defend themselves. The moment the sword finished its downward arc, the mercenaries had immediately fallen to the ground. A small trickle of blood flowed silently from their throats and stained the ground beneath them an iridescent, red color. But the Tianxiong clan had brought over 100 people, so the deaths of such a small amount of people was of no concern to them. Another group began to charge rampantly toward Jian Chen with sounds so loud that their stampeding echoed. Seeing the group of people that didn't seem to know death charge forward, Jian Chen's glare turned cooler. With a sigh, he increased the speed of his sword thrusts, and each one of the mercenaries found their throats stabbed. In their hearts, they knew this was a fatal blow and that there was not a single amount of mercy to be found within Jian Chen. Even though Jian Chen knew that the Tianxiong clan was a major clan in Wake City, he wasn't at all afraid of matters like this. Now that he was by himself once more, he didn't have anyone behind him he had to worry about, so there was nothing to be anxious about. Jian Chen's petite body constantly wove through his attackers as his light wind sword endlessly flashed around. With every arc of his sword, another person would fall, and thanks to his fierce battle strength, the entire restaurant had become a place of chaos. The chairs and tables that were previously organized neatly were now scattered about, while the fragrant dishes of food had crashed and spilled to the ground. As fast as a demon, Jian Chen quickly dispatched mercenary after mercenary. Within the span of a few seconds, another 10 mercenaries had fallen, never to rise again. It was almost as if Jian Chen had eyes on the back of his head that could observe everything on the battleground. Every single time a mercenary swung his saint weapon, Jian Chen would barely dodge the danger at the critical point. He was a single man facing dozens of people, but even after fighting for some time, he hadn't received any wounds. Even as the mercenaries tried their hardest to slash at him, Jian Chen's clothes didn't even have the slightest tear. Seeing his mercenaries fall to the floor one by one without Jian Chen sustaining any wounds, the young master of the Tianxiong clan scowled with dissatisfaction before cursing, "This group is useless, useless. Everyone here is good for nothing. I didn't know that my father had raised such a useless amount of trash that even a dozen of them couldn't seize a single person." He shook his head, turned to look at the man to his side before barking out, "What are you and your men standing around for? Hurry up and capture him. Once he is taken back to the Tianxiong clan, I will show him my awesomeness. Anyone that's insulted me has never gotten away with it. He won't be an exception." The group of people the young master had yelled at was all the strongest mercenaries. With their statuses, they would definitely be highly respected, even in the Tianxiong clan. After not being given face by the young master as he yelled at them, they couldn't help but feel annoyed. The men looked at each other before one of them spoke out, "Although this person is young, he is extraordinarily strong. His movements and the speed of his sword are incomparably fast. Even if it were us going against him, we would have difficulty as well. Moreover, all of his sword strikes so far have been fatal. If the mercenaries did not die by a sword through their throats, then they died from having their hearts pierced. From this, you can see that this person is not simple at all. Facing him head-on right now would be an unwise decision, and we may even get injured. For now, it would be best to call a few people over for him to waste his saint force over. The moment he uses up all of his saint force, we will strike and win easily." "Not bad, I approve of this suggestion." The man's suggestion had been quickly endorsed by the other mercenaries. Although this would increase the amount of casualties among the Tianxiong clan, the responsibility of that would fall upon the young master himself and not the mercenaries themselves. And since this second-generation master didn't care for them at all, they weren't willing to throw away their lives for him. If it meant throwing away the lives of others to persevere their own lives, they would do it. Following up, another squad of mercenaries entered the restaurant to kill Jianqin. The people in this group were of the great saint level, so they were stronger than the previous group by a large margin. Jianqin immediately engaged the great saints in a fierce battle. Against a group who was much stronger than before, Jianqin's pressure had greatly increased. He would not be able to fight as easily as before. As the fighting grew more and more intense, the entire restaurant became even more ruined. All of the surrounding walls had holes kicked through them, causing the entire restaurant to be on the verge of collapsing. Outside of the restaurant, a large crowd of people had gathered and were passionately gossiping about the fight that was happening inside. Inside the restaurant, in a brilliant flash of silver, Jianqin stabbed one of the great saints in the heart, killing him instantly. Stamping on the chest of the man, he sent the body flying backward, creating yet another hole in the walls of the restaurant before the body flew out. The restaurant shuddered violently once more, each sway stronger than the last. Finally, the loud crunching sounds of wood could be heard as it trembled once more. Jianqin nimbly dodged the blades of 3 saint weapons while looking at the wobbling pillars of the restaurant. Without any hesitation, he pushed the mercenaries away as he escaped from the newly created hole, out onto the streets. Chase after him. Don't let him get away. The moment he saw Jianqin leave the restaurant, the young master cried out at the mercenaries to chase after him. After the young master had spoken out, the group of mercenaries next to him had also cried out, "Not good, the restaurant's about to collapse, escort the young master away to safety." Immediately, a middle-aged man grabbed the young master by the shoulders before bringing him out of the way of the collapsing restaurant. Everyone else followed closely behind. The moment the group ran out of the restaurant, the entire restaurant caved in. In that moment, the mercenaries that didn't make it in time were buried. Soon after, a silver ray of light came flying toward the young master of the Tianxiong clan. Chapter 133. The Death of the Young Master of the Tianxiong clan. Young master, be careful. The middle-aged man cried out as he discovered the trajectory of the flashing white light. His face grew paler by 2 shades as he realized the sword was going too fast. With the sword already a meter from the young master's throat, under this type of situation, there was simply no time to react. Because of the lightning-like sword strike, the barely saint-level young master practically had no chance to react, and so the light-wind sword stabbed itself deeply into his throat. The young master of the Tianxiong clans widened his eyes as he looked dead on at the sword in his throat. There was a look of disbelief. He was not expecting this outcome at all. To think that this depressed little mercenary he had come across on the road to the magical Beast Mountain range would unexpectedly be the one to end his life. If he had known about this before, he wouldn't have dared to come close to Jianqin, but it was a shame that there was no such thing as a regret pill in this world for him to eat. Right now, his destiny was all but confirmed, and there was a better chance for him to alter the mountain range's landscape than this. Seeing their young master already have his throat pierced, the mercenaries by his side all stared in great shock. Some had even paled instantaneously. They were fully aware that the person in front of them was the young master of the Tianxiong clan who was dearly loved by the clan leader. He was also the successor of the clan when the time came, so to see their young master be killed right in front of their eyes, they couldn't believe it. If the clan leader were to hear of this news, no one knew how furious he would become and how severe their penalties would be. Just thinking about the severe temper of the Tianxiong clan leader had sent shivers among all of the mercenaries. Each one of them began to look at Jianqin with rage. If they weren't able to bring Jianqin back with them, then they would be served as a substitute instead. "Brat, you've killed our young master, prepare to die." All of the mercenaries began to charge at Jianqin without hesitation while shouting out, "All Tianxiong mercenaries, surround him immediately. Don't let him escape." These mercenaries all held high statuses in the Tianxiong clan, so the moment they spoke, every other members of the Tianxiong clan threw away their hesitation and immediately surrounded Jianqin from all 4 sides. At the same time, everyone that had been watching quickly distanced themselves further away. Even under the collapsed restaurant, a stream of mercenaries crawled out looking disheveled, but they continued to join the other mercenaries. Every single mercenary in the vicinity had seen with their own eyes the death of their young master by the hands of Jianqin, so they fully understood the gravity of the situation. Everyone took a step back in order to divert attention from themselves. At this moment, no one was willing to go and inform the clan leader. They were afraid of being implicated in the death of the young master and suffering the wrath in place of Jianqin. After landing the killing blow on the young master, Jianqin had immediately started to fight with the middle-aged mercenaries. These mercenaries were of the Saint Master level, and 3 of them were even at the peak Saint Master level. Against so many Saint Masters, the pressure was on full blast, causing Jianqin to have to go all out. Jianqin and the mercenaries continued to exchange blows in an endless storm of blades and fists that left the mercenaries flustered. Taking advantage of the situation, Jianqin had used his light wind sword and immediately stabbed one of the mercenaries through his heart. The moment Jianqin had stabbed into the middle-aged man's heart, a big axe had landed onto his left shoulder, leaving behind a wound that trickled and dyed his clothes red with blood. Feeling an immense amount of pain in his left shoulder, Jianqin's face immediately whitened. Pulling out his sword from the man's chest, he rapidly thrusted it at the mercenary with the axe. Seeing the silver flash of the light wind sword, the man with the axe immediately narrowed his eyes in concentration and brought his weapon up in front to receive the blow. At the moment of impact, the man was thrown backward by the explosive force. Ding! The tip of the light wind sword had stabbed into the blade of the axe. But thanks to the amount of sword chi around the sword, it had left a noticeable dent in the glossy blade. A sharp metallic sound was heard as 5 saint weapons immediately headed toward Jianqin at the same time while cutting off any possible escape routes for Jianqin. The amount of saint force that was radiating from each weapon was enough to cause a massive amount of air fluctuations. Jianqin's eyes flashed in annoyance as the amount of sword chi on his light wind sword was increased several times over, making the sword seem even hazier than before. In a flash he struck out at the 5 saint weapons and struck each one with a clang. While the light wind sword had stopped the 5 saint weapons, Jianqin's face grew white slightly as his right arm began to shake marginally. This combined strike was the unified strength of all 5 mercenaries, which would be extremely difficult to accept with ease. Because of the large amount of force put behind the 5 mercenaries, Jianqin's entire right arm had gone numb as even his inner organs had been temporarily shaken. Ha! Angrily shouting out, the Saint Masters didn't dare let Jianqin have the opportunity to breathe in rest. Once more striking at him, these mercenaries were extraordinarily clever. Unless there was a hole in their attack pattern, Jianqin would find it hard to defend himself without getting seriously harmed. A fierce expression revealed itself on Jianqin's face as he unexpectedly stood in front of the 5 saint weapons. His light wind sword then transformed in a silver streak of light as it flew at the closest person at breakneck speed. The light wind sword met no obstructions as it penetrated the man's throat. At the same time, the 5 saint weapons that were on the verge of cutting into him had their saint force already about to touch his clothes. In a split second, Jianqin's body twisted in a way that had dodged 3 of the saint weapons, but the remaining 2 had struck him on the back and waist. Jianqin stifled a shout as his already white face grew even more pale. He immediately pulled his sword from the throat of one of the mercenaries and looked at the remaining fighters. He threw away the idea of continuing to fight zealously and began to plan his way of escape from this area. Jianqin clearly understood that the Tianxiong clan had a formidable amount of power. The longer he stayed here, the more unfavorable his position would be. With his current strength, he would only be able to fight against a Saint Master. If the Tianxiong clan had a great Saint Master, he would be in trouble. However, with his remaining amount of strength, it would not be enough to defend himself. Sensing Jianqin's plan to escape, one of the remaining Saint Masters immediately cried out, "Block him quickly. Don't let him escape." Chapter 134. Wrath of the Tianxiong clan. Sensing that Jianqin was planning to escape, one of the remaining Saint Masters immediately cried out, "Block him quickly. Don't let him escape." The vigilant mercenaries surrounding the Saint Masters and Jianchen immediately charged forward to block Jianchen heroically. The saint weapons in their hands immediately came down toward Jianchen, and despite knowing how exceptionally strong Jianchen was, those who came forward to block him were not afraid at all. Jianchen's legs blurred slightly, causing him to deviate from his original path and onto the side. Dodging the numerous saint weapons, his right arm shook as his light wind sword danced wildly all around. One by one, the mercenaries that had tried to block him fell to the ground. How would saints or great saints be able to defend against Jianchen's usage of the profound steps? Despite being injured and having his fighting ability lowered, if Jianchen were to use his entire strength, these mercenaries still wouldn't have a chance. After killing the mercenaries with lightning speed, Jianchen twisted his body without any hesitation and began to run away from the mercenaries, as if possessed by a demon. As for the people that were observing the fight, they immediately left the road as soon as they saw him charge straight at them. It was almost as if they were afraid of obstructing Jianchen and meeting the same fate the Tianxiong clan members had. Jianchen had fought against the Tianxiong clan by himself while killing a few high-ranking experts, and even 2 peak Saint Masters, completely unafraid of the Tianxiong clan. The fact that he had even killed the young master of the clan had scared the mercenaries so much that they didn't dare to provoke him. In fact, some people had started to see him as a person with the strength of a great Saint Master. This type of person was rare to see even in a large group of mercenaries. Jianchen was moving at an extraordinary speed. In a short moment, he was already 30 meters away from the group of mercenaries watching him. At that moment, because there wasn't enough time, the mercenaries that were watching him simply weren't fast enough to open a path for him. Just as Jianchen was about to reach the group of mercenaries, his 2 feet suddenly stomped on the ground, pushing his entire body into the air, his feet still in a running position. The amount of force behind his leap was tremendous, sending him flying 10 meters away from the mercenaries. The moment his body touched the ground, Jianchen began to run away from them once more. After him. Hurry up and chase him. Don't let him escape. Catch him quickly. He's trying to escape from the city. Someone send a message to the city military officers to close the gates. A collection of furious, impatient shouts were heard as the mercenaries charged in from behind with deafening sounds. The few Saint Masters had followed Jianchen's actions and leapt over the observers, before quickly disappearing into the streets. The great saint and saint-level mercenaries quickly followed behind. Roar! Not too long after they entered the streets, the angry snarl of a magical beast could be heard from behind. The roar caused the entire street to shake, almost as if there was an earthquake. The mercenaries that were still standing around to watch suddenly cleared the road as an ox-like magical beast came charging through. Mounted on top of the magical beast was a sturdy, middle-aged man wearing a gold-embroidered robe. From his appearance, he looked to be approaching his 50s, and his serious expression made him seem even more imposing. His pupils as dark as the night itself shone with a cold glare that made many of the weaker mercenaries unable to look at him in the face. In a remote city like Wake City, people that had the ability to ride magical beasts were a very rare sight. One thing was for sure, however, if the person who was riding a magical beast was not a high-leveled expert, then it was a person from a noble clan. That was because only these 2 types of people could typically use magical beasts as mounts. Following behind the middle-aged magical beast rider was a group of about 50 people. Each member stood in a clean formation with a serious expression, and they looked like soldiers who were well trained. The exact moment the middle-aged man came into view, everyone's eyes focused in on him. The entire area descended into a strange silence. But soon after, the observing mercenaries all began to comment to each other. Isn't that the Tianxiong clan's leader, Tianxiong Lai? I didn't think he'd arrive so soon. It is said that not only is the Tianxiong clan the strongest clan in Wake City, but the clan leader is also extremely strong. He has already reached the middle Great Saint Master realm, and also possesses a defense based on his Earth attribute Saint Force as well. In all of Wake City, there are very few people that can contend against the Tianxiong clan's Tianxiong Lai. The young master of the Tianxiong clan is the result of years of hard work by Tianxiong Lai. It was with great difficulty that he had raised a son. It could even be said just giving birth to him was difficult enough. Ever since the young master's birth, Tian Xiongli had treated him like an expensive treasure. I don't know how angry Tian Xiongli will become after finding out his son has been killed. His son had been the only candidate for passing on Tian Xiong clan's legacy. Tian Xiongli, who was sitting on the magical beast, stared down at the mercenaries below him with a frosty glare. However, the moment his eyes fell on the white-robed youth on the floor, his eyes suddenly went rigid as an intense killing intent flooded out of him. His face began to grow red, even his breathing became laborious, and his facial expression changed to one of disbelief. Kang Er, Tian Xiongli cried out with a slight tremble in his voice. Jumping down from his mount, he ran over to where his son lay with wide eyes. Tian Xionglei's face paled rapidly as he studied the all-too-familiar face on the ground with a look of utter shock. Kang Er, Tian Xiongli cried out in anguish as he shook the youth's shoulder with both his hands. Feeling the icy body, Tian Xionglei's heart felt like it had shattered. From his vast amount of experience, he already knew that this person had already stopped breathing and died. Kang Er, Kang Er. Tian Xiongli continued to cry out in sorrow as tears began to flow from his eyes. His clear tears fell from his eyes, slowly flowing down his son's steadfast face, and eventually falling to the ground and breaking. Tian Xiongkang was the sole heir to Tian Xiongli. Because of an injury to his body, he had long since been rendered unable to have children. But this child had been his proudest achievement, and he had always doted on this son of his. Since it was impossible for him to have children, Tian Xiongkang was the clan's darling treasure. But now that Tian Xionglei's pride and joy were suddenly killed, his heart had been attacked and crushed in a way that was impossible to describe with words. Tian Xiongli looked to be around 40 to 50 years old, but that was because of the normal life expectancy of those on the Tianyuan continent, as well as his cultivation. In reality, he was already within his 70s, and with the injuries he had sustained earlier in life, he was utterly incapable of reproducing. Who was it that killed my Kang Er? No matter who it is, I Tian Xiongli will rip their body apart into 1,000 pieces. Chapter 135. Escape from Wake City. Wake City may have been a third-class city with a small amount of permanent residents, but because of its proximity to the magical Beast Mountain range and the amount of fertile land around them, the amount of people that flowed in and out of the city was at a constant high. There were countless merchants and peddlers trying to sell their wares in the streets of Wake City. Some stores were selling almost anything imaginable, but among all the stores, restaurants held the dominant spot in the industry. Mercenaries and merchants in caravans endlessly walked the streets while gossiping among each other. The clamor in the streets was truly a sign that Wake City was flourishing. However, at this moment, there was a huge disturbance on those same streets. Everyone could only see a youthful figure with blood-soaked clothes come running toward them at breakneck speeds. The appearance of the youth had been noticed by many people on the streets, who all pointed and began to chat with each other. Whoever blocks that person will be heavily rewarded by the Tianxiong clan. At the same time, a thunderous yell came from behind. A few more disheveled figures came running out from behind as they chased after the youth at equally fast speeds. Tianxiong clan, they're from the Tianxiong clan. The Tianxiong clan is the #1 clan in Wake City. I wouldn't dare to provoke the person that has committed an offense against the Tianxiong clan. After hearing the middle-aged man's words, many mercenaries began to whisper to each other. However, not a single person decided to chase after that youth and block his path. That youth was Jian Qin, the one who had easily killed the young master of the Tianxiong clan, as well as a few other mercenaries affiliated with them. Jian Qin hurried on over toward the city gates. Whenever he came across an obstruction, he would quickly fly over it with extreme speed. Despite this, there were still a few Saint Masters that were chasing him closely. However, Jian Chen's use of the profound steps had put him at an advantage, so even though those middle-aged men were stronger than him, they were unable to overtake him. They would at least need to be at the Great Saint level with a wind-attributed Saint force in order to overwhelm him. Otherwise, their speed was only enough to barely keep up with Jian Chen's level. Plus, they weren't able to overcome the obstacles as easily as Jianchen had. Despite being a third-class city, the amount of area Wake City spanned across was still huge. Even if Jianchen hurried to the city gates as fast as he possibly could, the period would at least take the amount of time it takes for a candle to burn. Having put all his effort into running away, Jianchen was now breathing quite hard. He had previously just engaged in a fierce battle that consumed quite a bit of his saint force, and now he was even injured. The burden that he felt from running with all his might under his current condition was extremely great. In addition, his body was feeling the intense pain from his wounds every time he moved, so Jianchen's nerves were being put to the severe test. Up ahead, the gigantic and majestic towers of the city gates blurrily came into view, along with the soldiers on it. Right now, Jianchen was about 5 kilometers away from the city gates, while the Saint Masters behind him were about 50 meters away from him. Seeing the city gates get closer and closer, Jianchen's heart couldn't help but relax a bit, although his speed didn't lessen. Jianchen was aware that with his current strength, there was no way for him to go against the Tianxiong clan, which had an enormous influence over Wake City. Right now, all Jianchen wanted to do was to escape from Wake City. That way, the amount of danger would decrease drastically. Roar! At this moment, the angry roar of a magical beast came from behind Jianchen. As the roar dissipated, another angry shout followed soon after. I, Tianxiong Lai, will heavily reward whoever catches that man. Hearing the sounds coming from behind, Jianchen's face changed slightly. Based on the voice, he could determine how strong the person was, and this was someone he couldn't afford to fight against. Tianxiong Lai, I presume that's someone else from the Tianxiong clan? Jianchen thought to himself secretly. Increasing his speed, Jianchen began to run even faster. The merchants and mercenaries that had heard the angry roar of Tianxiong Lai looked stunned. Tianxiong Lai, isn't that the current leader of the #1 clan in Wake City? To offend a member of the Tianxiong clan and then be chased by them means that they must be a strong person then. Forget it, I've only just reached the great saint level, it's best not to get involved. The Tianxiong clan is the strongest within the city. If I were to help stop this person, then Tianxiong Lai would definitely reward me handsomely. Perhaps I can even become a friend of the Tianxiong clan. Something like this would be very fortuitous for me. A few of the mercenaries who were familiar with the power structure in Wake City began to talk about the status of Tianxiong Lai. As they talked to each other, a few of the stronger men had started to weigh the benefits of helping out. It was obvious that Tianxiong Lai had quite an amount of prestige in Wake City. The moment he spoke out, many mercenaries had immediately been influenced. Seeing Jianchen come running toward them, many of the mercenaries had already brought out their saint weapons and walked out to block Jianchen's path. The moment one mercenary walked forward, all the other mercenaries followed suit and helped to block Jianchen's path. These men were clearly enticed by the irresistible reward put up by Tianxiong Lai. After all, the Tianxiong clan was as powerful in reality as they were in name. Seeing the group of people up ahead, Jianchen's face immediately hardened. But since he was going so fast, he was already right next to them in the span less than 5 seconds. Just as Jianchen was about to make contact, the mercenaries brought their saint weapons out too as they charged at him. Not wanting to get entangled with them, Jianchen leapt into the air to dodge the incoming group. Landing on top of the roof of a store, he disappeared over the heads over the crowd. Where do you think you're escaping to? Immediately, a group of experts with faster reaction times flew up with him and slashed at Jianchen with their saint weapons. A severe amount of killing intent flashed from Jianchen as the silver-colored light wind sword appeared out of nowhere. With a swish of his hand, it quickly flew at his pursuers. Ding 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 ding. The sounds of saint weapons clashing against each other rang throughout the air as blood began to sprinkle down below. The few amount of mercenaries that had chased after Jianchen were like broken kites that had backed down to the ground uselessly. After dropping them to the ground and silently struggling by hearse. There was no movement from them. Instead, a trickle of blood flowed from their throats and chests to the ground below them. Chapter 136, Pursuit of the Tianxiong clan. While Jianchen was in midair, he had quickly killed the mercenaries who were chasing him. This sudden show of strength had surprised everyone. They hadn't thought that Jian Chen would be able to kill the mercenaries. With this new development, many of the mercenaries decided against their original plan to block Jian Chen. Although many people were seduced by Tian Xiong-Lai's promise of a heavy reward, one needed to be alive to claim it. If they were to throw away their lives, they would not be able to enjoy it even if they earned the reward. After killing the mercenaries blocking his path, Jian Chen continued onward. Jumping down from the buildings, he ran off to get closer to the city gates. After seeing what had just happened, there was no longer any mercenary that dared to obstruct him. So for a good amount of time, Jian Chen's journey to the city gates was very smooth. You won't get away. Even if you run to the ends of the earth itself, I, Tian Xiong-Lai, swear to break your body into 1,000 pieces. An angry roar came from the Tianxiong clan leader riding on his magical beast mount from behind Jian Chen. They were currently chasing after Jian Chen at top speeds, and it wasn't hard to tell from the noise just how powerful Tianxiong-Lai's determination to kill Jian Chen was. Jian Chen's killing of Tianxiong Kong was tantamount to killing Tianxiong-Lai's whole family. After all, Tianxiong Kong was his sole son, and with Tianxiong-Lai's body being in such a state, he had lost the ability to reproduce. Jian Chen turned a deaf ear from Tianxiong-Lai's murderous roars. The only thing he wanted to do was to quickly escape from the huge city. The sounds of the footsteps from behind were getting louder and louder as Jian Chen realized that they belonged to a magical beast much faster than his own speed. 5 kilometers, 4 kilometers, 3 kilometers. Jian Chen was rapidly approaching the city gates. There was only 2 kilometers left until he reached them. He could already see the giant gates leading outside of the city, but right behind was Tianxiong-Lai, who was riding his magical beast only 1 kilometer behind him. Commander Haddo, if you can close this gate and help stop this person, then I, Tianxiong-Lai, won't be able to thank you enough. Tianxiong-Lai's voice came out like powerful thunder from behind him. Quickly, the city gates to Wake City began to close. Seeing the city gates close, Jian Chen's face immediately fell. His eyes swept toward the gates 40 meters away as he let out a deep breath of air. The saint force within his body began to circulate within his body, increasing his speed by some degree. At the same time, Jian Chen was employing the techniques he had learned from his past life. Both of his legs ran at such a fast speed that his feet looked as if they were gliding across the ground. For every 10 or 20 meters that he glided, his legs touched the ground once. In a flash, Jian Chen arrived at the foot of the city gates. Already, there was a large group of mercenaries congregating by the rapidly closing gates awaiting Jian Chen. Quite a few of them were cursing Jian Chen. Jian Chen didn't bother to slow down at the sight of this. Instead, his legs disappeared in a blur as he ran another 30 meters before leaping at the city gates in preparation to climb it. Finally gathering his strength, Jian Chen's legs stamped onto the ground and began to scale the wall. The moment Jian Chen had started to climb the wall, the people below had immediately taken notice and began to chatter nonstop. In 2 breaths' time, Jian Chen had smoothly climbed up the 40-meter tall city wall. Both of his legs stepped off of the wall without a hitch, and he flew over the heads of one of the guards on top of the wall before descending down the other side. It was going well for Jian Chen. On his way down the city wall, he met no obstructions. Even as he flew over the heads of the guards on top of the wall, they could only look at him with wide eyes. As Jian Chen climbed the city walls, Tianxiong-Lai, who was right behind, immediately jumped up onto the wall without his magical beast and started to scale it in the same manner as Jian Chen had. However, not only was the magical beast very heavy, it was not an expert in climbing, so it remained on the ground as Tianxiong-Lai stopped in his tracks, but didn't admit his violations, nor was he willing to go with the officials. After that, another group of 10 middle-aged men rushing over and looked at the city walls before climbing up the wall and running in the same direction as Jian Chen. These people were the saint masters of the Tianxiong clan. Open the gates! Just as these people flew out from the city, a deep sound came out from behind the gates. Soon after, the closed gates began to slowly creak open. On the wall stood 2 middle-aged men. One of them wore a long white robe, while the other wore black armor. At that moment, The two middle-aged men were looking at the group of people currently walking into the distance outside of the city at rapid speeds. When Jian Chen's group disappeared from their lines of sight, the middle-aged man wearing armor looked at the white-robed man next to him and asked, "Commander Haddo, why didn't you hold him back?" The white-robed middle-aged man smiled and said, "He killed Tianxiong Lai's sole son, Tianxiong Kong, and I haven't even had the chance to thank him yet. Why would I stop him?" The armored man paused for a bit, and seemed to have thought of something. He broke into a smile that made it seem like he was taking joy in another's misfortune. Outside the city, the feverish Jian Chen looked back at Tianxiong Lai, who was pursuing him from behind. His face grew heavy as he saw Tianxiong Lai. Although Jian Chen hadn't fought with him yet, he knew that Tianxiong Lai was not an equal opponent. Looking at the area behind him, Jian Chen began to think for a while before biting his lips in frustration and then turned to run toward the direction of the magical Beast Mountain range. He knew that in this wide open space, there would be no way for him to shake off the determined Tianxiong Lai. The only method for him was to run toward the magical Beast Mountain range. From there, he would be able to use the complicated forest and terrain to his advantage to escape from him. Seeing the gap between him and Jian Chen shrink further and further, Tianxiong Lai's eyes immediately turned red. He didn't conceal his powerful murderous aura at all as he roared in anger, "You can't run away from me." Jian Chen turned back to survey his surroundings. There was only about a 500 difference between him and Tianxiong Lai. Based on this situation, Tianxiong Lai would most likely catch up with him before he reached magical Beast Mountain range. Jian Chen hesitated for a bit before clenching his teeth. The light wind sword suddenly materialized in his right hand. The next moment, Jian Chen's figure, which was rushing forward, suddenly stopped. He then spontaneously charged toward Tianxiong Lai. "Great Saint Master, I want to witness exactly how strong you are." Chapter 137. Battling a great Saint Master. Seeing that Jian Chen was no longer running, and was even voluntarily rushing toward him, Tianxiong Lai couldn't help but give a fierce-looking smile as he roared, "Yes, come. I'm going to dismember your body into thousands of pieces. No, dying would be letting you off too lightly. I will definitely make you live in a hell to the point where you'd rather die." As he said this, a wide axe suddenly appeared in Tianxiong Lai's hand. This axe was extremely large, over double the size of Tianxiong Lai's tall and sturdy body. The entire axe had the color and luster of yellow earth, and its sharp edge flashed with a cold, threatening glow. The light wind sword in Jian Chen's hand slashed through air, making a faint, air-splitting sound as it was thrust toward Tianxiong Lai. "Heh!" Tianxiong Lai let out an explosive shout, and the axe in his hand suddenly flashed with a yellow glow. It then swung down toward Jian Chen with a shrill, ear-piercing shriek. To think that it's an Earth-attributed saint force. Seeing the yellow glow on the axe, Jian Chen's heavy expression couldn't help but sink even further. He then immediately retracted his light wind sword to dodge Tianxiong Lai's attack. With a flash, he appeared next to Tianxiong Lai's side, and the light wind sword pierced toward his waist. Tianxiong Lai sneered. He suddenly let go of one of the hands gripping the axe, and his palm quickly became surrounded by a layer of yellow light. Just like that, it began to rush to grab Jian Chen's light wind sword. The light wind sword was tightly caught by Tianxiong Lai's right hand, and the sharp sword blade unexpectedly didn't harm him at all. There was a trace of shock reflected in Jian Chen's eyes. Although he had long since heard about the profound talent that those with the Earth attribute possessed, their extremely powerful defense, but he hadn't realized it'd be to such an extent. Afterward, Jian Chen's eyes fiercely flashed. In the next moment, the light wind sword currently being tightly grasped by Tianxiong Lai's right hand suddenly emitted powerful sword qi. Under this strong attack, the yellow layer of light around Tianxiong Lai's right hand quickly turned lighter, indicating that it was faintly dissipating. Tianxiong Lai quickly released the light wind sword. The moment his hand left the blade, the yellow glow surrounding his hand also disappeared. A yellow cross-shaped wound could be seen on Tianxiong Lai's hand, and fresh blood quickly covered his entire palm, dyeing it crimson. His eyes never once wavered from Jian Chen, who stood right in front of him. Tian Xiong gave an angry growl as he continued to focus on Jianchen before demanding, "Speak, why did you kill my Kong heir? Who was it that hired you to do it?" Seeing how there was a good 10 feet distance from Tian Xiong, Jianchen lowered his sword a fraction and spoke coldly, "No one told me to do anything, it was your son that provoked me first. If you want to blame anyone, then blame yourself for teaching a child to not know anything besides bragging and causing trouble wherever he goes." Tian Xiong's glare froze over at Jianchen before asking once more, "Was there really no person that told you to kill my son? You need not be afraid of being someone's scapegoat. If you tell me right now, then I'll let you die a quick death." "I've already told you. It's up to yourself if you want to believe it or not," Jianchen replied. Seeing how there was no hint of a lie in Jianchen's words, Tian Xiong couldn't help but believe him. Opening his mouth, he said, "So it seems that it was my fault. I was too lenient on Kong heir, and so Kong heir is dead because of me." As he spoke, Jianchen could hear the sorrow and regret in Tian Xiong's voice. At this moment, a decent distance away, a group of 10 people were approaching rapidly. Seeing the group of people behind Tian Xiong, Jianchen mood couldn't help but change for the worse. If he couldn't defend himself against someone like Tian Xiong, then with another 10 Saint Masters added into the mix, Jianchen would definitely die here today. While reabsorbing his light wind sword back into his body, Jianchen's feet immediately stamped against the ground, causing a clump of dirt to fly up. Concentrating the Saint force in his body in his hands, he slapped the dirt forward. Immediately, the clump of dirt became a huge dust cloud that flew toward Tian Xiong and blocked his vision. Gaining this new opportunity, Jianchen didn't hesitate. His figure immediately became a blur as he headed toward the magical Beast Mountain range. Because of the dust cloud, Tian Xiong's vision was heavily impacted and could not see around himself at all. In order to avoid a surprise attack by Jianchen, he immediately leapt backward from the dust cloud area. Although, the moment he saw Jianchen had instead chosen to run away, he exploded with anger, "You can't escape." Before he had even finished talking, he started to chase after Jianchen. However, because of this delay, the head start Jianchen had gave him a few hundred meters of distance. In this current situation, Jianchen was unable to heal himself using the Light Saint force. What he needed the most was to run away at full speed to the magical Beast Mountain range to avoid Tian Xiong's wrath. Wake City was only 20 kilometers away from the magical Beast Mountain range. With Jianchen running as if his life depended on it, he was already close to the magical Beast Mountain range. Arriving at the forest, which was by the outskirts of the mountain, he came across a dense part of the forest. Tian Xiong, who was still chasing him from behind, could already guess what Jianchen was planning to do. With some hesitation, he brought out his giant axe that gleamed in the light in his hands. Tian Xiong held his axe above his head before letting out an explosive shout and swinging downward. Then a 2-meter-long Earth attribute Saint Force-colored crescent moon came flying toward Jianchen. Sensing a large amount of energy fluctuating behind him, Jianchen didn't bother to look around and instead ran to the side in an attempt to dodge. The crescent moon-like force of energy had moved past Jianchen's back. This time, Jianchen's good luck had saved him once more. Bang! The Earth Saint force exploded against a huge rock, letting out a loud sound as a result and scattering the energy in all 4 directions. The stone, which was previously the height of 2 people and 3 meters wide, exploded into multiple fragments that flew everywhere. Several of the fragments that flew from the stone hit Jianchen. Jianchen had tried his best to avoid every single stone fragment that flew at him, but with the sheer amount of them, enough to cover the sky, there were already some sharp rocks that had made it past his defenses. With this unfortunate accident, Jianchen's movement was definitely hindered. "Kid, accept your death." A loud roar came from behind. It was Tian Xiong with his axe up high and a large amount of Saint force ready to be used. Chapter 138. A chance to kill from the forest. In a flash, the light wind sword appeared in Jianchen's hand. In the next moment, an overwhelming amount of sword chi began to flow around the sword, causing it to look hazy to everyone. Separating itself from Jianchen's hand, It became a streak of silver light as it flew toward Tianxiong Lai's axe at unbelievable speeds. Ding! The light wind sword and the axe collided against each other, creating a sound of metal hitting metal. After the attack, the strong amount of sword chi on the light wind sword and the earth saint force on the axe began to dim with each push against each other. A large shockwave had then resulted, spreading out with the two weapons acting as the epicenter, pushing Jianchen backward just by the force. The light wind sword was blasted backward before slowly floating to a halt. Stopping 10 meters away from where it used to be, it began to shake violently before another wave of sword chi enveloped the sword and shot forward once more. Whoosh! At this moment, the light wind sword was like it possessed a mind of its own. With a shrill sound as it traveled through the air, it flew toward Tianxiong Lai without any further delay. Seeing the light wind sword come at his throat, Tianxiong Lai immediately tilted his neck out of the way. Despite the light wind sword barely missing his neck, the sword chi on the sword had left behind a small trace of a wound on his neck. Jianchen cried out in pity inwardly, to think that he had such a good opportunity and Tianxiong Lai had unexpectedly dodged it. He wasn't discouraged. Using his spirit to control the light wind sword, he commanded it to fly at Tianxiong Lai once more. Seeing how the light wind sword was flying by itself in midair, Tianxiong Lai couldn't but cry out in shock at this inconceivable event. What kind of trick is this? A saint weapon that is being controlled by no one. How can it fly by itself with such a speed? Tianxiong Lai questioned to himself in amazement. No matter how much he looked at it, he wasn't able to understand it. This was something out his range of knowledge. Once more, under the control of Jianchen, the light wind sword flashed toward Tianxiong Lai. Tianxiong Lai shouted loudly as his earth saint force began to emanate from his body before condensing over his body like a type of armor. Raising his saint weapon into the air, he sent it flying down toward the light wind sword. At Jianchen's will, the light wind sword avoided Tianxiong Lai's attack by moving to the side. Because Jianchen's strength was far too different from Tianxiong Lai's, even if the soul sword increased his attack power several times over, it was still not enough to take on a hit from Tianxiong Lai. Meanwhile, Tianxiong Lai's earth saint weapon crashed into the ground. Bang! Came the sound as the axe ejected all of the nearby dirt, creating a crater. The light wind sword flew around in a circle before reorienting itself and flying at Tianxiong Lai once more. Before Tianxiong Lai could even react, the sharp point of the sword had stabbed into his sturdy body. The incredibly sharp sword chi collided against the incredibly sturdy body of Tianxiong Lai. As the two forces grinded against each other, Tianxiong Lai's durable body couldn't handle the pressure anymore. The light wind sword bore a hole in his armor and stabbed through into his body. However, just as the light wind sword was about to stab into his skin, the inner saint force within Tianxiong Lai's body blocked it. The great Saint Master's saint force then began to force it out of his body. Jianchen's eyebrows furrowed together as he thought about how difficult Tianxiong Lai was. He didn't think that with such a good opportunity, he still wasn't able to kill him. It would appear that even with the assistance of the soul sword, he was only able to hinder Tianxiong Lai for a moment. Even with good luck, he wouldn't be able to do serious harm, and if he wanted to kill him, it would be easier to scale the heavens. With the soul sword taking up a lot of his spirit, Jianchen wouldn't be able to last for much longer. Thinking to himself, Jianchen quickly came to a decision. In a split second, the light wind sword flew back to his hand before disappearing from view. Without further hesitation, Jianchen began to run toward the magical Beast Mountain range. The most important matter was that he needed to run away. Because of Tianxiong Lai's strength, defending himself was a difficult task. Right now it was impossible to kill him. It would be for the best to wait until he was stronger and then come back to resolve the issue. Tianxiong Lai stared gloomily at Jianchen escaping as the earth saint force surrounding him was slowly absorbed back into his body. On his back was a small wound that was slowly dyeing a part of his clothes red. "Clan leader! My lord!" At that moment, 10 mercenaries came into view behind Tianxiong Lai and stared with shock at the wound on Tianxiong Lai's back. "Chase him! You cannot let him escape!" Tianxiong Lai shouted before leading the mercenaries forward. Jianchen had already entered the thick part of the forest in a mad dash. However, his current speed was a lot slower than his original speed. Just breathing was a laborious task now, and his face was rapidly paling. With each and every step he took, he could feel the various wounds inflicted on him, tormenting his nerves. There was no time for him to find a place to treat his wounds, so he could only focus on running instead of using the light saint force to heal himself. Stopping under a big tree to catch his breath, he turned his head around only to see Tianxiong chasing from behind. Regaining his bearings, Jianchen once more began to run toward the magical beast mountain range. On the road, Jianchen had used the trees and tall grass to hide his figure in order to throw off his trackers. In the forest, it was a lot easier to hide. The trees and tall grass would throw off any pursuers with ease. Unknown to the both of them, the chase had taken over half the day, meaning it was noon once more. The scorching hot sun was blocked by the cloudy skies, making the area around him look murky and dark. While Tianxiong and his group of mercenaries were trying to track Jianchen's footprints through the magical Beast Mountain range, in the end, they had finally lost him. Tianxiong stared angrily at the tall grass around him with a dreadful expression. Immediately taking out a piece of paper from his robes, he said, "Xing Dao, take this warrant back immediately and organize for a group to search the mountain range." "Yes, my lord." One of the males took the warrant from Tianxiong hand and disappeared from the forest. Chapter 139. Stealth Kill. After the mercenary with the warrant left, Tianxiong waved his hand at the others, searched the surrounding area carefully for any traces. "I want to know where he ran off to." After losing track of Jianchen, Tianxiong and his group of mercenaries could only hope to look for traces left behind by him, but this was a task that was significantly hard. In a dense part of the forest in the magical Beast Mountain range, Jianchen sat down under a big tree with a pale face. Carefully using his light wind sword to pick out the pieces of stone fragments in his body, his clothes were beginning to be dyed completely red. Each time the tip of the light wind sword stabbed into his flesh, a new wave of pain pelted through Jianchen. The constant source of pain had tested Jianchen's nerves, and his forehead was soaked with sweat with each additional moment. When the final stone fragment had been extracted from his body, Jianchen finally let loose a relieved grunt. Without energy, he slumped against the wide tree trunk and calmly took in deep breaths of air. After resting for a while, Jianchen concentrated his senses on his surroundings only to discover that it was peaceful once more. Sitting in a cross-legged position, a ball of white light slowly came into view and enveloped Jianchen in it. It continued to heal Jianchen's body for a few moments before turning into a ball of milky white light. By this point, Jianchen's body was completely submerged. From the outside, you could only see a blurry outline of his body. For an hour, Jianchen continued to stay submerged in that milky glow of white light before it started to gradually dissipate. Not too long afterward, his body could be clearly seen within it. This time, Jianchen's face no longer had that pale look on it. Instead, his regular healthy glow was back. The various wounds that used to adorn his body were now completely gone without a single scar left on his body. However, Jianchen didn't wake out of his stupor just yet. He continued to recollect the lost saint force he has used up in his escape. The amount he had used was not small, and the saint force within his body had almost been completely depleted. Because of the fact that he was not only in the magical Beast Mountain range where magical beasts could find him, but Tianxiong's men would be searching the area. So all Jianchen could do was to try and maintain his body's optimal condition in order to be able to confront any dangers he might come across. Not aware of how much time had elapsed, Jianchen's body had actually sat in the same position for 6 hours, constantly refilling his saint force. Not at any single point in time did his body move, neither did his eyes ever blink open. It was almost like he was a monk that had entered a deep meditation state and had completely lost awareness of the material world around him. At that moment, from behind a tree, a slender python came slithering out noiselessly toward Jianchen. Coiling around the tree, it paused, before it slowly glided toward him again, and not too long after, it began to stretch its small jaws open. Just as the snake was less than a foot away from him, The cross-legged Jian Chen suddenly opened his eyes. A cold glint appeared in his eyes as the light wind sword appeared in the palm of his right hand and stabbed at the python with an extremely quick speed. The light wind sword accurately pierced into the area where the heart was located. With such a large amount of sword chi, the python's heart was instantly ruptured. Not even looking at the python, he reclaimed the light wind sword into his body and continued to sit down next to the tree. Closing his eyes, he continued to try to recover his spirit. While it looked like he was in a deep meditative state like a monk, in actuality, he was keeping close track of his environment. In an area where magical beasts roamed about, he didn't dare be careless as he tried to recover his saint force. The 4 or 5 foot long python fell from the tree trunk now that it was powerless to stay coiled around it. As it dropped, it released a deep hissing sound before struggling on the ground for a moment before going still. After another 4 hours, Jian Chen opened his eyes once more and stood up on the tree branch. He took out another set of clothes from within his space belt and changed into them. Noticing that it was now dark, he began to think for a while before deciding on leaving the area. Jian Chen carefully looked around himself in case the Tianxiong clan was nearby. At this moment he had fully recovered from his wounds, and even his saint force was back to optimal conditions. Now that he was in the magical Beast Mountain range with its complicated terrain, Jian Chen was confident that if he were to come across Tianxiong Lai again, he would be able to easily retreat, unlike the fight before where it had occurred in open space. Just then, a small rustling sound came from behind. The moment he heard that sound, Jian Chen's heart stopped. He quickly leaped up onto a nearby tree branch that was hidden from view thanks to the leaves. Not too long after, a group of men wearing white slowly came into view. This type of lifestyle is exhausting. Having a group of us head into the magical Beast Mountain range in order to find just one person without even a single portrait. How are we supposed to look then? One of the white-robed mercenaries complained to the others. That's right, we don't even know what this person looks like. Even if we were to come across him, how would we even recognize him? A bearded middle-aged man said, My fellow brothers, do you know exactly why the clan leader wanted us to look for this man so badly? A person said curiously, I've heard that Tianxiong Kong was killed by this man. Tianxiong Kong is the sole heir to our Tianxiong clan. You tell me if your son was killed, wouldn't you be furious? Then of course the clan leader would definitely want to catch this murderer. I've heard the Tianxiong clan has already sent 300 of its members into the magical Beast Mountain range. Among all those people, the weakest members are great saints while there's around 30 saint masters. With the clan leader dispatching that many people into the mountain range, do you think we'll be able to catch the murderer? After all, the magical Beast Mountain range is huge, and it's hard to say if that man has already escaped from here or not. That can't be said for sure, but according to the news, the murderer had already been heavily injured by the clan leader. In this giant forest, even if he were to escape, he wouldn't get far. The group of mercenaries began to idly talk as if they were taking a stroll instead of hunting someone. Just as these mercenaries walked under the huge tree, the leaves above suddenly swayed as a person darted out with his light wind sword ready to stab into the group below. Just as these mercenaries tilted their heads up, the sword had already stabbed in between a man's eyebrows. Everyone be careful, someone's attacking. Someone was fast to respond, but before he could even finish his sentence, the light wind sword blurred momentarily before stabbing into his throat. Chapter 140. The Tianxiong clan's retreat. By that point, the rest of the mercenaries finally overcame their surprise and took out their saint weapons to fight. The sword-wielding swordsman turned himself over in the air and dodged the incoming strikes before gracefully landing on the ground. The sword chi radiating from his sword slowly covered the air around it. It soon also enshrouded the mercenaries within it as well. By the time the sword chi had dissipated, the Tianxiong clan members had all fallen to the ground with a hole in their throats. A trickle of blood leaked from their wounds out onto the earth below. Taking back his sword, Jian Chen calmly looked at the grounded members before saying, You've given me quite the useful amount of information. 30 saint masters and over 200 great saints, The Tianxiong clan really isn't weak at all. To think that they would send that many people into the magical Beast Mountain range to find me, it's no wonder they are the #1 clan in Wake City. Jian Chen became silent for a moment before his face slowly started to turn into a smile. So if you aren't going to let me go, then don't blame me for being fierce. I'll play around with you then. In the blink of an eye, several days had passed, and in the span of those days, Jian Chen had roamed around the place and focused on dealing with the men from the Tianxiong clan. Although Jian Chen normally wasn't one for revenge, he also wasn't one to not fight back. After being provoked and bullied to such a state by the Tianxiong clan, if he didn't make a move, then he wouldn't be able to call himself Jian Chen. Already the amount of people killed by Jian Chen had reached somewhere in the 200 range. Among those there were 10 Saint Master experts, the rest were all great saints. With a disastrous loss like this, even for the Tianxiong clan, it would be hard to recover from since they had been damaged down to their roots. The Tianxiong clan actually knew this well and clear, but they had taken no steps to remedy it. On the contrary, they had instead taken more members from their clan and had them search the magical Beast Mountain range in search of Jian Chen's footsteps. Tianxiong Lai definitely wanted to take revenge for his deceased son no matter how heavy a price he would have to pay. The events that had transpired for the past few days had been known to everyone in Wake City. The Tianxiong clan had been the main ruling power for over 10 years, so Tianxiong Lai's reputation could even be said to be very clear. The permanent residential mercenaries and merchants all knew who Tianxiong Lai was and how strong he was. The news that the heir of the Tianxiong clan, Tianxiong Kong, was killed and that Tianxiong Lai had brought a group of ferocious-looking mercenaries into the magical Beast Mountain range to find the assassin had caused a huge commotion in Wake City. This topic was spoken by mercenaries and merchants alike over a cup of tea and a plate of food. However, whoever was so audacious to kill Tianxiong Kong, no one knew who that person was. The only thing they had known about this mysterious assassin was that he was an extremely young person. Every other detail was unknown. The other clans in Wake City had secretly observed the affairs of the Tianxiong clan. When they realized just how much damage the Tianxiong clan had taken while in the magical Beast Mountain range, each one of them had begun to prepare their clan to take over and divide up the shares of the Tianxiong clan in the market. The Tianxiong clan had controlled a large part of Wake City, causing every other clan to be incredibly jealous, but some of them had feared the power of the Tianxiong clan, so they had stayed patient. However, now that the Tianxiong clan had come across such an unexpected accident, their power was no longer the same. Many of the clans couldn't let this opportunity pass by them anymore, and began to stretch out with their hands for the Tianxiong clan's profits. In the magical Beast Mountain range, a group of 20 to 40-year-old worried mercenaries sat in a circle around each other. Clan leader, the situation isn't looking too good here. That brat is as treacherous as a devil and has also gained many experiences about how to hunt in a forest. We are at a disadvantage since he holds an advantage with the terrain and has already shaken us off his trail multiple times. Not only that, but this brat is also very strong. Many of the smaller groups didn't have the strength to kill him at all and eventually were destroyed. Even if his opponent is an expert of the Saint Master, he has been able to go against them all the same. So far the amount of people we brought into the magical Beast Mountain range has been reduced down to half, but I'm afraid that if things continue on like this, the amount of people we will have left would be countable on our hands. A middle-aged man said with concern. That's right, clan leader, that brat is far too cunning. If we group together, he takes on an ambush approach in a way that we don't get to see his face, and the moment we split up, he comes after us one by one. Not only that, but he is as nimble as a monkey in these forests, so we're unable to chase after him. What can we do about that? In our group right now, only my lord would be able to go up against this brat. Another mercenary said with the same amount of worry. Clan leader, right now we are at a disadvantage, it would be best to retreat for now and think things over. A frail-looking person said. Clan leader, right now since we have lost so many members in the magical Beast Mountain ranges, our development in Wake City will be halted. We cannot let that happen. Tianxiong Lai clenched his fist in frustration as his face revealed a hesitant expression. In his heart a fierce struggle was being played. After some time, Tian Lai bit his lips and spoke out, "Tell everyone to retreat." "Yes, clan leader." Upon hearing this order, each and every mercenary revealed a happy expression as their hearts secretly let loose a breath of air in relief. After facing Jian Chen these past few days, not a single one of them wanted to throw away their lives. It was with good fortune that Tian Lai had been accompanying them. In their eyes, they were deeply afraid of coming across Jian Chen without him. A person grabbed onto a bamboo shoot before setting the fuse on fire. With a shrill whistle, the bamboo shoot flew straight up into the air before exploding with a loud bang and transformed into a scarlet fog of smoke that scattered everywhere. Within the depths of the magical Beast Mountain range, there was a group of mercenaries that sat around in a circle and ate some pieces of meat. AI, when this assassin will be captured, I don't know. The amount of casualties our Tianxiong clan has accumulated has already reached over a large amount. 10 Saint Masters have already died. To be able to kill Saint Masters with ease, with us having only the strength of a great saint, I don't know how long it'll be before we become a target for him. As long as we don't come across him, we'll be fine. Otherwise, we won't have a life to return home with. The mercenaries sat around the fire and chattered among themselves with worry. At that moment, a loud shrill sound spiraled into the sky. Hearing that, every single mercenary looked up past the tree canopy to see the blossoming fireworks in the sky, leading to a few mercenaries crying out in relief. "That's our Tianxiong clan's retreat signal." One of the mercenaries cried out in joy. "We can finally return home. What's everyone doing just standing around? Let's hurry up and go home. Did you guys want to stay around here or something? That assassin could come at any time and slaughter us like livestock." Right, let's hurry up and go. This isn't a place we should stick around." After that, no one was in the mood to eat their food and immediately left the place. Not too long after they left, a shadow dropped down from the trees. This figure was wearing the leather of a magical beast, and already there was the beginning signs of a beard growing on his face. Seeing the group of mercenaries fade out from sight, the figure revealed a sneer. "So you want to retreat? That's fine. But just this last time, I hope you let loose one final stream of blood. Whoever offends Jian Chen, will not be able to leave so easily." You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.